Hello, my friends, and welcome. I'm so glad you decided to join me tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights, find your most comfortable chair, and leave the busyness of the world behind. While you're getting settled, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Your engagement truly helps, and the more you interact, the more these chilling tales will find their way back to your feed. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to share a few stories that are as true as they are unsettling. So, take a deep breath, get cozy, and let's explore the dark together. I was 20 years old, a junior in college, and I thought I understood how the world worked. I thought justice existed. I thought wealthy people faced the same consequences as everyone else. I was wrong about all of it. I need to tell you what happened to me during winter break 2009, because the truth has been eating at me for 15 years, and I cannot stay silent anymore. My name is Olivia Bennett, and this is the story of how a rich man buried the truth about what his son did to me, how the police helped him do it, and how I am still living with the aftermath today. It started with an invitation. My friend Rachel worked part-time at a country club in Lakewood, Connecticut, cleaning locker rooms and restocking towels. One of the members was a man named Victor Caldwell, owner of a luxury car dealership that sold imported vehicles to people with more money than sense. Rachel mentioned that Victor's daughter Nadia was throwing a New Year's Eve party at their estate and needed extra help with setup. The pay was $200 for 4 hours of work. I was broke, between semesters, and desperate. I said yes. The Caldwell estate was the kind of place you see in magazines. Stone pillars flanked a circular driveway. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Rachel and I spent the afternoon stringing lights across the massive backyard, setting up tables under a white tent, and arranging bottles of champagne on ice. Everything was perfect. Everything was controlled. Nadia was polite, but distant, the kind of girl who had never cleaned anything herself. Her brother, however, made my skin crawl the moment I met him. His name was Elliot Caldwell. He was 23, pale, thin, with dark eyes that never seemed to blink. He had dropped out of business school the year before and now worked at his father's dealership, though Rachel told me he mostly sat in the office playing computer games. He watched us while we worked, standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, not speaking, just staring. At one point, I went inside to use the bathroom. When I came back out, Elliot was standing in the hallway. He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. He said, "I have been watching you work. You are very thorough." I forced a polite smile and walked past him. He smelled like cinnamon, sharp and chemical, like he had been eating those hard cinnamon candies. The scent was so strong it made my throat burn. Rachel and I finished the setup around 6 that evening. The party was not supposed to start until 9, but Nadia handed us our cash and told us we could leave. I was relieved. I wanted to get out of that house. But then Rachel got a text. Her boyfriend had surprised her with concert tickets for that night. She looked at me apologetically and asked if I could stay and help serve drinks during the party. Nadia was offering another $200. I should have said no. I should have left with Rachel. But I needed the money. So I stayed. The party started slowly. Guests began arriving around 9:30, mostly college-aged kids from wealthy families, all dressed in designer clothes and holding expensive phones. I moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, smiling when spoken to, invisible when not. The tent in the backyard was heated, strung with white lights, filled with the kind of laughter that only comes from people who have never worried about anything real. Elliot was always there. Not next to me, but close. Watching from across the tent, standing near the bar, lingering by the doorway. Every time I turned around, his eyes were on me. Around 11, one of the guests offered me a drink. A girl in a silver dress handed me a champagne flute and said, "You have been working all night. Have one with us. It is New Year's." I hesitated, but she insisted. I took a sip. It tasted normal. Sweet, bubbly, cold. I drank half of it and went back to work. That is when things started to blur. I do not remember finishing the glass. I do not remember feeling drunk. What I remember is a sudden, overwhelming dizziness, like the ground had tilted beneath me. My vision doubled. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected. I tried to set down my tray, but my hands would not cooperate. Someone took my arm. A voice said, "You need to sit down." I was led inside the house. I remember the warmth of the hallway, the softness of a couch beneath me. I remember trying to speak, but my tongue felt thick, useless. I remember the smell of cinnamon, and then I remember nothing. When I woke up, it was 4 a.m. I was lying on a couch in a side room I had never seen before. My clothes were disheveled. My tights were torn. There was a dull, aching soreness in my body that made me feel sick. I sat up too fast and immediately vomited onto the floor. Nadia appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She said, "Oh my God, are you okay? You passed out." We did not know what to do. I tried to ask what happened, but she cut me off. She said, "You drank too much. My dad is calling you a cab." I looked down at myself. My sweater was on backwards. My bra was unhooked under my shirt. I felt wrong. Violated. Empty. I said, "I only had half a glass. Something is wrong. I need to go to a hospital." Nadia's expression changed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. She said, "Listen, my father is a very important man. If you make accusations, if you cause a scene, it will not end well for you. You were drinking. Everyone saw you. Just go home. Forget this happened." I was too disoriented to argue. A cab was already waiting outside. I got home and immediately called my parents. They drove me to the hospital. A rape kit was administered. The doctor told me I had been sexually assaulted. Tests showed high levels of a benzodiazepine in my system, a drug I had never taken. The doctor said it was consistent with being drugged. I filed a police report the next day. I gave them everything. The name of the family, the address, the timeline, the physical evidence. 2 weeks later, a detective named Paul Hendricks called me in for an interview. He sat across from me in a sterile white room and said, "Miss Bennett, we have spoken to the Caldwell family. They say you were intoxicated and became ill. Multiple witnesses confirm you were drinking heavily throughout the night." I said, "I had half a glass of champagne. Someone drugged me." He said, "The problem is we cannot prove who. There were over 40 people at that party. Anyone could have slipped something into your drink." I said, "What about Elliot Caldwell? He was watching me all night. He was there when I went inside." Detective Hendricks looked at me with something close to pity. He said, "Elliot Caldwell has an alibi. He was outside with friends when you went inside. We have statements from 6 people confirming that." I felt the room spin. 6 people. All of them likely friends of the family. All of them protecting him. I said, "He did this. I know he did." Hendricks closed his file. He said, "Without physical evidence tying him to the assault, we cannot move forward. I am sorry." The case was closed. But I was not done. I started digging. I found a local reporter named Grace Holland, who specialized in investigative journalism. I told her everything. She believed me. Grace started looking into Elliot Caldwell's history. What she found was chilling. There had been 2 other complaints. 2 other young women who had worked events at the Caldwell estate. Both had reported feeling drugged. Both had woken up disoriented with gaps in their memory. One had torn clothing. The other had bruises on her thighs. Both cases were dismissed. Lack of evidence. Unreliable witnesses. Conflicting statements. Grace also discovered something else. Victor Caldwell, had donated over $50,000 to the local police benevolent association the year before. He was a major donor to the mayor's re-election campaign. He played golf with the chief of police. Grace wanted to publish the story, but her editor killed it. Too risky, he said. Not enough hard evidence. The Caldwell family threatened a defamation lawsuit if any allegations were printed. Grace quit her job 2 months later. She told me she was sorry. She told me the system was broken. She told me to move on. But I could not move on. I hired a private investigator with the little money I had. He staked out Elliot for weeks. What he found was a pattern. Elliot frequented bars near college campuses. He always carried a small tin of cinnamon candies in his pocket. He always watched women working service jobs, waitresses, bartenders, event staff. He never approached them directly. He was patient, calculated. He waited for opportunities. The investigator also found something in Elliot's car during one of his stakeouts. A small brown glass vial tucked under the driver's seat. He photographed it but could not retrieve it legally. I took all of this to the police again. A different detective. A different precinct. I laid it all out. They told me it was circumstantial. They told me the case was closed. They told me to stop harassing the Caldwell family or I would face legal consequences. That was when I realized the truth. Victor Caldwell had bought their silence. Not just with money, but with power, with connections, with the weight of his name. Elliot would never face charges. He would never be held accountable. And he is still out there. I moved away from Connecticut 3 years ago. I changed my name legally. I started therapy. I installed security systems in my apartment that would make a fortress jealous. I check my locks 4 times before bed. I do not drink anything I did not pour myself. I do not attend parties. I found out last year that Elliot got married. He has a daughter now. I wonder if his wife knows. I wonder if she would believe me if I told her. Sometimes I see black crows outside my window. They sit on the fire escape, perfectly still, watching. I know they are just birds. I know that. But they feel like a reminder, like something unfinished. Detective Hendricks retired 5 years ago. Grace Holland moved to Oregon and works in communications now. Victor Caldwell still owns his dealership. Elliot still works there. And I still wake up some nights smelling cinnamon and feeling that same dull ache, that same sickness, that same powerless rage. I am sharing this because I want people to understand something. Wealth does not just buy things. It buys silence. It buys protection. It buys the ability to make victims disappear. If you have ever been dismissed, if you have ever been told your trauma does not matter because someone else has money or power or connections, I believe you. I see you. You are not crazy. You are not lying. And to anyone who thinks this kind of thing does not happen, that the system works, that justice is blind, I am here to tell you the truth. It does happen. The system is broken. And sometimes, the people who hurt you walk free while you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Elliot Caldwell is still out there. And so am I. Watching, waiting, remembering. I used to work as a hospital administrator at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. 26 years old, fresh out of university, excited about my first real job. My role was simple: manage patient records, coordinate admissions, handle paperwork. Boring work, but stable. Safe. I'm posting this because I need people to understand what I saw, what I witnessed, and why I had to leave everything behind. This happened 3 years ago. I still cannot sleep without checking every lock in my apartment. Twice. The day everything changed started like any other morning. August. Hot. The hospital was busy. Patients coming in for surgeries, families visiting. The usual chaos of a functioning medical facility. I was at my desk on the 4th floor. reviewing admission forms, when I noticed something odd in our security log. An ambulance had arrived at 8:47 a.m. Standard. Except the driver had not signed out. Every paramedic who enters our hospital signs in and out. Hospital policy. This one signed in, walked upstairs, and nothing. No signature. No exit time. I remember thinking it was just an oversight. People forget. I made a note to follow up later. Then I saw him. He walked past my office at exactly 9:52 a.m. Green and white paramedic uniform. Medical bag in hand. But something about the way he moved made me look twice. Too calm. Too purposeful. Most paramedics in our hospital rush, patients waiting, ambulances to return to service. This man walked like he had all the time in the world. His face was wrong. Not deformed. Not suspicious. Just wrong. Like someone wearing a mask that fit perfectly but could not hide what was underneath. His eyes scanned everything. Every door. Every person. Every camera. The kind of awareness you do not see in medical workers. The kind of awareness I had only seen in soldiers. I watched him stop outside room 423. 2 men sat there. I knew them. Bodyguards. They had been posted there for 8 days. The patient inside was not just anyone. He was important. Protected. The kind of person who gets private security even in a hospital. The paramedic showed his badge. The guards examined it. Nodded. Let him in. And then, nothing. He went inside. The door closed. I cannot explain why I felt uneasy. Maybe it was the way he moved. Maybe it was the fact that no paramedic visits a patient with bodyguards unless something is very wrong. Maybe it was instinct. But I opened our admission database and searched for the patient in room 423. Adnan Al-Ghul. Admitted 8 days earlier. Appendicitis surgery. Recovery. Stable condition. No emergency calls logged. No medical alerts. No reason for a paramedic to be checking on him. I picked up my phone to call the nursing station and ask why a paramedic was visiting a stable patient. That is when I heard shouting from the hallway. The bodyguards were yelling. Doors were slamming. I stood up, walked to my door, looked out, and saw them dragging someone out of room 423 on a stretcher. Not just someone. The patient. Adnan Al-Ghul. Unconscious. Covered in blankets. Strapped down. The paramedic walked behind them. Still calm. Still purposeful. One hand on the stretcher. The other near his medical bag. I should have gone back to my desk. Should have assumed this was an emergency transfer. But something was wrong. The bodyguards were not with them. They were shouting at the nurses, demanding to know who authorized this, pulling out their phones. I followed. I do not know why. Curiosity. Stupidity. Maybe I knew something was wrong and wanted to understand what. But I followed them down the stairwell, keeping 1 floor above them, listening to the sound of the stretcher wheels echoing below me. They did not take the elevator. That was the second thing that felt wrong. Emergency transfers always use elevators. Faster. Safer. These men took the stairs. Quietly. Deliberately. I reached the ground floor just as they exited into the parking lot. I watched through the glass doors as they loaded the stretcher into the back of the ambulance. The same ambulance from 8:47 a.m. The paramedic climbed into the driver's seat. No second paramedic. No nurse. Just him. The ambulance pulled away. Slowly. No sirens. No lights. Just gone. I went back inside. My hands were shaking. I did not know why. Emergency transfer, I told myself. He is being moved to another hospital. Completely normal. But then I checked the system again. No transfer order. No discharge paperwork. No authorization from any doctor. According to our database, Adnan Al Ghul was still in room 423. I walked back upstairs. The bodyguards were screaming at hospital security. Police were arriving. Nurses were panicking. I stood in the hallway and listened. The bodyguards kept saying the same thing. He was taken. Someone took him. The paramedic was not real. Not real. That is when I understood. That is when I realized what I had witnessed. The hospital administration locked down the building. Police questioned everyone. Security footage was reviewed, but the ambulance had no identification number. The badge the paramedic used was authentic, stolen, they said, from a real paramedic 3 months earlier. The uniform was real. The medical bag was real. Everything was real except the man wearing it. They never found him. Never found the ambulance. Never found Adnan Al Ghul. The official story was that he had been kidnapped by Israeli intelligence, Mossad. An operation so clean, so perfectly executed, that he was taken from a guarded hospital room in the middle of the day, and no one could stop it. But I knew something else. I knew I had seen the operation happen. I had followed them. I had watched them leave. And I had not said anything until it was too late. 2 weeks later, I started noticing things. A car parked outside my apartment. Same car. Every day. Black sedan. Tinted windows. No license plate visible. It would sit there for hours. Then it would leave. Then it would come back. I told myself it was paranoia. Coincidence. But then I started getting phone calls. No one spoke. Just silence. Then the line would disconnect. 5 times in 1 week. Then my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken. Nothing was damaged. But things were moved. My computer was turned on. I had left it off. My desk drawers were open. I had closed them. Someone had been inside. I filed a police report. They took notes. Did nothing. I installed a camera. The next day, the camera was gone. Not stolen. Not broken. Just gone. Like it had never existed. That is when I found the note. It was slipped under my door while I was at work. 1 sentence, printed on plain white paper. You saw something you should not have seen. I left Gaza that night. Packed 1 bag. Told no one. Moved to Cairo. Changed my name. Cut contact with everyone I knew. Started over. I still do not know who was watching me. I do not know if it was Mossad cleaning up witnesses, or if it was Hamas, assuming I was involved, or if it was someone else entirely. But I know this. I saw an operation that was never supposed to be seen. I watched a man walk into a hospital, disguise himself as someone who belongs, and take a target in broad daylight. And I know that people who execute operations like that do not leave loose ends. I am sharing this because I want people to understand something about intelligence operations. They are not movie stunts. They are not dramatic spectacles. They are invisible. They are normal. They are a paramedic with a medical bag. They are a person who looks like they belong. They are so perfectly disguised that even when you see them, even when you watch them work, you do not realize what you are witnessing until it is too late. And once you realize, once you understand what you saw, you become a problem. I moved 3 more times after Cairo. I have not used my real name in 2 years. I check every lock, every window, every car parked on my street. I will probably do this for the rest of my life, because I know something they do not want me to know. And people like that, they never stop watching. It is one of the most toxic herbicides in the world, banned in over 30 countries, but still legal in the United States. 1 sip, as little as 10 milliliters, can kill an adult. Once swallowed, it burns through the esophagus, destroys the stomach lining, shuts down the kidneys, and fills the lungs with fluid until you drown from the inside. There is no antidote. Death takes between hours and weeks, depending on the dose. Every moment is agony. This case from Oregon in 2022 involves a 12-second video. A couple, smiling, laughing, filming themselves for social media. A juice challenge, they called it. But that video, recovered from a dead man's phone, captured the exact moment his girlfriend tried to murder him. And when that attempt failed, she tried again. This time, she succeeded. This is a documented case. The details come from police reports, forensic toxicology, court transcripts, and digital evidence recovered by investigators. I have changed some names to protect the families. Everything else is exactly as it happened. This is the story of Marcus Reynolds and the woman who poisoned him with tea. October 2nd, 2021. Marcus Reynolds, 23 years old, was riding the bus from Eugene to Portland. He was in his final year studying radiology at a medical college in Eugene. That afternoon, he saw a woman sitting alone near the back of the bus. Her name was Emma Hayes. She was 22, a graduate student studying English literature at a different university. Marcus sat next to her. They started talking. By the time the bus reached Portland, they had exchanged numbers. Over the next few weeks, they texted constantly. They met for coffee, for walks, for dinners. And within a month, they were in a relationship. Marcus fell hard. Emma was smart, beautiful, charming. She seemed perfect. Marcus told his friends he had found the one. He started planning a future with her. He talked about marriage, about building a life together. Emma seemed just as invested. She told him she loved him. She said he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. But in February 2022, something changed. Emma's family had arranged a marriage for her. Without telling Marcus, they had introduced her to a man named David Carter. He was 28, an Army officer stationed at Fort Lewis near Tacoma. Emma liked him immediately. He had a stable career, a good income, benefits. He was everything Marcus was not. Marcus was still a student. He had no job, no money, no real prospects yet. David was established, secure. So, when David proposed, Emma said yes. On March 4th, 2022, Emma got engaged to David. The wedding was set for 1 year later, March 2023. When Marcus found out, he was devastated. He confronted Emma. He told her he thought they had a future together. Emma apologized. She said it was over. She said she had to follow her family's wishes. Marcus, heartbroken, ended the relationship. He stopped calling her. He stopped texting. He tried to move on. But Emma would not let him. 2 weeks after the engagement, Emma reached out to Marcus. She said she made a mistake. She said she still loved him. She said she would leave David and marry Marcus instead. She promised that in November, she would run away with Marcus. They would elope. They would start over somewhere new. Marcus believed her. He wanted to believe her. So, he took her back. And for the next few months, their relationship continued. But Marcus did not know that Emma had no intention of leaving David. For Emma, Marcus was a distraction, a way to pass the time until the wedding. She was using him, and when he became inconvenient, she decided to get rid of him. As the months passed, Marcus became more serious about the relationship. He talked about eloping. He talked about marriage. Emma panicked. She needed to end things, but Marcus would not let go. So, she tried a trick. She told Marcus that according to her astrological chart, there was a defect in her horoscope. A planetary alignment that meant her first husband would die young. She told him this hoping he would be afraid, hoping he would leave her. But Marcus dismissed it. He said he did not believe in astrology. He said if she was serious about the curse, he would marry her immediately to prove it was nonsense. Emma realized he was not going to leave. So, she changed tactics. She agreed to marry him. On a random afternoon, she let Marcus take her to a small chapel in the countryside. They had a private ceremony. No family, no witnesses. Just the two of them and a minister. Marcus thought it was romantic. Emma thought it was meaningless. But she played along. After the ceremony, Marcus bought her a necklace and told her to wear it as a symbol of their marriage. Emma wore it when she was with Marcus, and took it off when she was with David. For months, she lived a double life. Engaged to David, secretly married to Marcus. In August 2022, Emma and Marcus checked into a hotel together twice. Once on August 13th, once on August 18th. They had sex both times. Marcus believed they were husband and wife. Emma knew it was all a lie. By late August, Emma realized she had to act. The wedding to David was only 7 months away. Marcus was becoming more demanding. He wanted to tell his family about the marriage. He wanted to make it official. Emma could not let that happen. So, she started planning. On August 20th, 22nd, Emma searched Google on her phone 23 times. She searched for paraquat toxicity. She searched for paraquat poisoning symptoms. She searched for how much paraquat is lethal. She searched for how long it takes paraquat to kill someone. She was researching how to murder Marcus. 2 days later, on August 22nd, Emma invited Marcus to meet her at a scenic overlook near the Columbia River. She told him she wanted to do a juice challenge for social media. A fun couple activity. Marcus agreed. He met her there at noon. When he arrived, Emma was holding 2 bottles of mango juice. She started recording a video on her phone. She asked Marcus what the challenge was. Marcus, confused, asked her. Emma, smiling, said it was a juice challenge. But she told him to stop recording. The video ended after 12 seconds. But in those 12 seconds, you can see Emma's face. The fake smile. The tension in her eyes. The nervousness. Because one of those juice bottles had been opened. Emma had mixed 50 crushed paracetamol tablets into it. The other bottle was sealed. She handed Marcus the poisoned bottle. Marcus took a sip. Immediately he tasted something wrong. Bitter. Chemical. He spat it out. Emma panicked. She grabbed both bottles and threw them away. She said the juice must have gone bad. She suggested they leave. Marcus, trusting her, did not question it. He thought it was just bad juice. He did not realize his girlfriend had just tried to kill him. For the next 6 weeks, Emma tried to figure out another way. Paracetamol had failed. She needed something stronger. She remembered that her uncle, a farmer, kept herbicides in the garage of the family house. One of them was paraquat, a restricted chemical banned in many places, but still used illegally by some farmers. Emma researched it. She learned that paraquat was one of the deadliest poisons in the world. Just a small amount could cause organ failure, and the symptoms would not appear until hours later, making it difficult to trace. Emma decided this was her solution. On October 13th, 20th, 22, Emma called Marcus. She told him her mother and uncle would be out of the house the next day. She said she would be alone. She hinted at sex. She sent him explicit text messages. She promised him things. Marcus, excited, agreed to come over. The next morning, October 14th, Marcus arrived at Emma's house on his motorcycle. His friend, a man named Tyler, came with him and waited outside. Marcus went inside. Emma greeted him warmly. She kissed him. She made small talk. Then she challenged him. She said, "You always make fun of me for drinking medicated tea. Why don't you try it?" Marcus often joked about the herbal teas Emma drank for health reasons. Emma used that to manipulate him. She dared him to try it. Marcus, wanting to prove he was not afraid, agreed. Emma went to the kitchen and came back with a cup. It was a dark liquid. She called it kashaya, a medicated herbal remedy. But it was not. Emma had mixed paraquat herbicide into the tea. She had also added medicine stolen from her mother's prescription, a painkiller that would mask the chemical taste. She handed the cup to Marcus. He drank it. The taste was horrific. Bitter, burning. But Emma was ready. She quickly handed him a fruit drink to wash it down. Marcus drank that too, trying to get rid of the taste. Within minutes he felt sick. He ran to the bathroom and vomited. Then he ran outside and vomited on the street. Tyler, his friend, saw him and was alarmed. He helped Marcus onto the motorcycle and drove him home. But Marcus kept vomiting. Green liquid. Bile. Blood. Tyler did not understand what was happening. Marcus told him he drank some tea at Emma's house, and it made him sick. Tyler thought it was food poisoning. He did not know Marcus had been poisoned. Over the next 3 days, Marcus was taken to 3 different hospitals. Each time, doctors thought it was a stomach virus. They gave him fluids and sent him home. No one suspected poisoning. By the 3rd day, Marcus could not speak. His throat was so damaged he could not swallow water. His organs were failing. On October 17th, he was admitted to the intensive care unit. Doctors started dialysis. They were trying to save his kidneys. But it was too late. The paraquat had already spread through his body. While Marcus was dying in the hospital, Emma was texting him, pretending to care. She sent messages saying, "I am so sorry. This is all my fault. I feel terrible." She asked if he was okay. She asked which hospital he was in. She acted concerned. But it was all performance. She wanted to know if he was still alive. She wanted to know if he would survive. And when his reply stopped coming, she knew he was close to death. On October 20th, a magistrate came to the hospital to record Marcus's statement. Marcus could barely speak. His voice was weak, broken. But he told the magistrate that his girlfriend gave him tea and he got sick. When the magistrate asked if he wanted to file charges, Marcus said no. He still did not believe Emma had poisoned him on purpose. He thought it was an accident. 2 days later, on October 22nd, Marcus's father was allowed into the ICU. Marcus told his father the truth. He said he and Emma had been in a relationship. He said they had sex multiple times. He said Emma gave him tea, and it made him sick. His father asked, "What kind of tea?" Marcus said it was medicated medicine. His father asked if Emma could send the prescription. Marcus texted Emma. She replied that her mother had washed the bottle, so the label was gone. Marcus's older brother, Stephen, got involved. He demanded Emma send at least a photo of the bottle cap so they could identify the brand. Emma said the medicine was transferred to a different bottle. She kept making excuses. Stephen pushed harder. Finally, Emma stopped replying. On October 25th, 2022, 11 days after drinking the poison tea, Marcus Reynolds died. His lungs had filled with fluid. His kidneys had shut down. His liver had failed. He died of multiple organ failure and cardiac arrest. He was 23 years old. The next day, Stephen filed a police report. He told them Marcus had been poisoned by his girlfriend. He gave them Emma's name and number. The police opened an investigation. On October 31st, 6 days after Marcus's death, police brought Emma in for questioning. At first, she lied. She said Marcus came to her house uninvited. She said he saw her engagement photos and became angry. She said he hit her. She said he then drank medicine from her mother's bottle as a suicide attempt. She said it was not her fault. But the police had already recovered Marcus's phone. They had recovered Emma's phone. They had search warrants for her internet history. And what they found was damning. The 12-second video from August 22nd. The Google searches about paraquat poisoning. The text messages luring Marcus to her house on October 14th. The deleted messages where Emma had been researching herbicides. The timeline of her engagement to David and her secret marriage to Marcus. When the police confronted Emma with this evidence, she broke down. She confessed. She admitted she had poisoned Marcus. She admitted she wanted him dead so she could marry David without complications. She admitted she had researched paraquat and knew it would kill him. She even admitted that she had tried to poison him with paracetamol 6 weeks earlier. The police arrested Emma. They also arrested her mother and her uncle. Emma's mother was accused of conspiracy because she knew about the relationship and allegedly helped cover it up. Emma's uncle was charged with destroying evidence because he had hidden the paraquat bottle after the murder. The trial began in late 2024. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The video, the search history, the text messages, the forensic toxicology report showing paraquat in Marcus's body, the testimony from Marcus's brother, the dying declaration Marcus gave to the magistrate. Emma's defense tried to argue that Marcus had been blackmailing her. They said he threatened to release private photos if she did not marry him. They said Emma acted in self-defense. The jury did not believe it. On January 20th, 2025, the court delivered its verdict. Emma Hayes was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge called it one of the rarest of the rare cases. He said the premeditation, the cruelty, the deception, all warranted the harshest penalty. Emma was sentenced to death. She is currently on death row, awaiting execution. Her uncle received 3 years in prison for destroying evidence. Her mother was acquitted. The case shocked the community. People could not believe that a young woman, educated from a good family, could commit such a brutal crime. But the evidence was undeniable. Emma had spent weeks planning Marcus's death. She had researched poisons. She had lured him to her house with promises of sex. She had mixed herbicide into tea and watched him drink it. And then for 11 days, she pretended to care while he slowly died in agony. Marcus's family said he loved Emma until the very end. Even on his deathbed, he did not want to believe she had poisoned him on purpose. He thought it was an accident. That is how much he trusted her. And that trust killed him. The 12-second video is the most haunting piece of evidence. If you watch it closely, you can see everything. Emma holding 2 juice bottles. One sealed, one already opened. The nervous smile on her face. The way she quickly tells Marcus to stop recording. She knew what she was doing. She knew one of those bottles contained poison. And she was about to hand it to the man who loved her. That is the kind of evil we are dealing with. Not impulsive. Not passionate. Calculated. Cold. Methodical. Emma Hayes is a predator. She used love as a weapon. She manipulated Marcus into trusting her completely. And then she murdered him when he became inconvenient. The court was right to call this case rare. Not because poisonings are rare, but because the level of deception, the patience, the cruelty, all of it together, is extraordinary. Emma lived a double life for months. Engaged to one man while secretly married to another. Having sex with Marcus while planning a wedding with David. And when Marcus would not let go, when he kept pushing for a real future, she decided the easiest solution was murder. Paraquat poisoning is one of the most painful ways to die. Within hours, the chemical starts destroying tissue. The throat swells shut. The stomach lining dissolves. The lungs fill with fluid. Victims describe it as feeling like they are drowning and burning at the same time. There is no antidote. Doctors can try dialysis, but it rarely works. Most victims die within days or weeks. And every moment is agony. Marcus suffered for 11 days. He could not eat. He could not drink. He could not speak. His organs shut down one by one. And through it all, Emma was texting him, pretending to care, asking how he was feeling, apologizing for the tea, acting like a concerned girlfriend. When she knew exactly what was happening, she knew he was dying. She wanted him to die. That is sociopathy. That is pure evil. The saddest part of this case is that Marcus could have been saved. If doctors had known he was poisoned in the first 24 hours, They could have flushed his system with dialysis. But Emma deliberately misled his family. When Stephen asked for the name of the medicine, Emma lied. She said the label was washed off. She said the bottle was with her mother. She kept making excuses. Because she knew that if they identified the poison early, Marcus might survive. So she stalled. She lied. She delayed. And by the time doctors figured out it was paraquat, it was too late. Marcus's organs were already failing. Emma's manipulation did not just poison Marcus. It killed him. This case should be a warning. Not everyone who says they love you means it. Some people use love as a tool, a way to control you, a way to get what they want. And when you stop being useful, when you become a problem, they will discard you. Or worse, they will eliminate you. Marcus trusted Emma completely. He believed every lie she told. He married her in a chapel. He had sex with her. He planned a future with her. And she was planning his death the entire time. That is the horror. Not that she killed him, but that she made him believe she loved him while doing it. If someone is living a double life, if they are promising you a future while secretly planning another one, if they are asking you to keep your relationship secret, those are red flags. Pay attention to them. Marcus ignored every warning sign because he was in love, and it cost him his life. Do not make the same mistake. Love should not require secrecy. Love should not involve lies. And love should never, ever involve poison. Emma Hayes is on death row. She will likely appeal. She may spend years fighting the sentence. But eventually, justice will be served. And when it is, I hope Marcus's family finds some peace. He deserved better. He deserved someone who actually loved him, not someone who saw him as an obstacle. Marcus was 23 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him, and Emma took that from him. For what? So she could marry an army officer? So she could avoid an awkward conversation? The selfishness is staggering. The cruelty is unforgivable. If you are in a relationship where something feels off, where your partner is hiding things, where promises are made, but never kept, trust your instincts. Walk away. It is better to be alone than to be with someone who might poison your tea. Benjamin had been screaming for 3 days straight. But the voices coming out weren't his own. Dr. Nora Pierce had seen many things in her 20 years at Whitmore Psychiatric Hospital. Self-harm, violent delusions, catatonic states that lasted months. But she had never seen anything like Benjamin Hale. He sat in the observation room, strapped to the reinforced chair. His wrists were raw from pulling against the restraints. His throat was hoarse from screaming. But he wasn't stopping. Couldn't stop. The voices kept coming. Nora stood behind the one-way glass, watching, listening. Benjamin's mouth moved constantly, words spilling out in rapid succession, each one spoken in a different voice. A child's voice, high-pitched, pleading. An old woman's voice, crackling with age and exhaustion. A man's voice, deep, angry, demanding, and dozens more, overlapping, competing for space, fighting to be heard. Let us go, they cried in harmony. We've been trapped so long, so long. Please, please let us go. Benjamin's case file sat open on Nora's desk. Age, 32. Occupation, archivist. No history of mental illness. No drug use. No traumatic brain injuries. 2 weeks ago, he'd been completely normal. Then one morning, he'd woken up screaming in languages he didn't speak. His roommate had called 911. The paramedics found Benjamin on his bedroom floor, convulsing. Eyes rolled back. Foam at his mouth. They'd brought him to the emergency room thinking it was a seizure, but the neurologists found nothing. No brain damage, no electrical abnormalities, no physical explanation. And then the voices started. Nora had been assigned his case 4 days ago. At first, she'd thought it was dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities created by severe childhood trauma. But the voices were too many, too distinct, too aware. Each one had its own name, its own story, its own desperate plea for freedom. And they all spoke at once. Dr. Pierce. The voice behind her made Nora turn. Dr. Marcus Chen stood in the doorway, holding a thick folder. "I found something," he said quietly, "about Benjamin's family history." Nora took the folder. Inside were medical records dating back 70 years. Benjamin's grandfather, his great-grandfather, going back 5 generations. All of them had died in psychiatric institutions. All of them had exhibited the same symptoms. Multiple voices, violent episodes, constant screaming about being trapped. "It's hereditary," Marcus said. "Whatever this is. It runs in the family, and it always ends the same way." "How?" Marcus's face was grim. "They all died before their 35th birthday. The records say natural causes, but the nurse's notes suggest something else, something they couldn't explain." Nora returned to the observation room. Benjamin was quiet now, slumped in his chair. His breathing was shallow, exhausted. She activated the intercom. "Benjamin? Can you hear me?" His head lifted slowly. When he looked at the mirror, his eyes were bloodshot, hollow, but for just a moment, they were his own. "Help me," he whispered. "They won't stop. They're trying to get out. All of them. All at once." "Who are they, Benjamin?" "I don't know." His voice cracked. "They say they're people. People who died. People who got trapped. They say I'm the vessel. That my family has always been the vessel. That we hold them. We keep them." His body jerked. The child's voice returned. "Let us out. Let us out. We want to go home. We want to see our mothers. Please. It hurts to be here. It hurts." Benjamin's face contorted. Another voice pushed through. "You have no right. No right to keep us. We are not yours to contain." Then, another. "I've been here 70 years. 70 years in the dark. In the space between breaths. Let me go. Let me go. Let me." Nora spent the next 3 days researching Benjamin's family. She found journals, letters, medical records from institutions that no longer existed. And in one dusty archive, she found a letter written by Benjamin's great-great-grandmother. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "My son carries the burden now, as his father did, as his grandfather did. We do not understand what curse we bear, only that we must bear it. The voices come when we reach maturity. They fill us. They demand release. But to release them would be unthinkable. The priest said they are not souls. They are fragments, pieces of the dead that refuse to pass. Angry, violent. If they were freed, they would not rest. They would not find peace. They would spread, infect others, create more vessels. My son knows this. He accepts his duty. He will carry them until his body breaks, as I will carry mine, as all our blood must carry theirs." Nora stood outside Benjamin's room that night. Through the window, she could see him thrashing against the restraints. The voices were getting louder, more desperate. Dr. Chen had recommended sedation, heavy medication, induced coma until they could, what? There was no cure for this, no treatment, just Containment. At 3 a.m., Nora entered Benjamin's room alone. He was awake, eyes wide, terrified. "They're breaking through," he whispered. "I can feel it. The walls inside me. And they're cracking. When they break, when they finally break free, what will happen?" Benjamin's face twisted, multiple expressions fighting for control. "They'll find new hosts. Anyone nearby. They'll split, multiply, spread like a disease. My family kept them contained for generations. But I'm not strong enough. I'm the last vessel. And when I break..." He looked directly at her. "Everyone here will become like me. And then, everyone they touch. And then..." Nora understood then. The restraints weren't just for Benjamin's safety. They were for everyone's safety. The voices inside him weren't just trapped souls seeking freedom. They were something else. Something that had been growing, multiplying, feeding on the vessel's life force for generations. Benjamin's family hadn't been cursed. They'd been chosen, selected, used as living prisons for something that couldn't be allowed to spread. And now, the prison was breaking. Over the next week, Benjamin's condition deteriorated. His skin grew pale, his body thin. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The voices became constant, screaming, pleading, threatening. Nora watched from behind the glass, taking notes, documenting everything. Dr. Chen wanted to transfer him, send him to a government facility, let someone else deal with the impossible. But Nora refused. If we move him, if we expose him to more people, what happens when he breaks? Chen had no answer. On the 9th day, Benjamin stopped screaming. He sat perfectly still in his chair, head bowed, silent. Nora entered the room cautiously. "Benjamin?" He looked up. His eyes were different now. Not hollow, not terrified, empty. "They've gone quiet," he said. His voice was flat, mechanical. "They're preparing, building strength. They know I'm dying. They know the vessel will fail soon. And when it does, is there any way to stop it? Any way to reinforce the containment?" Benjamin smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was the smile of something wearing his face. "There is one way," he said, "but you won't like it." That night, Nora read through the final pages of Benjamin's great-great-grandmother's journal. The last entry was dated the day before the woman died. The vessel must never empty. If one fails, another must be prepared. The burden passes, blood to blood. But if the bloodline ends, if there is no heir, then the vessel must be destroyed completely, burned, scattered, erased, so that nothing remains for them to cling to. It is the only mercy, the only way to keep them from spreading. My son understands. When his time comes, he will make the choice, as I have made mine. Nora stood in Benjamin's room the next morning. He was unconscious, his breathing barely perceptible. The machine showed his vitals failing. Hours left, maybe less. Dr. Chen stood beside her. "We need to call the authorities," he said. "Tell them what's happening. Evacuate the hospital. And then what? Let whatever's inside him escape. Infect hundreds of people. Thousands. What else can we do?" Nora looked at the medical cart beside Benjamin's bed. At the medications, the equipment, the tools meant to save lives. "We contain it," she said quietly, "like his family has done for generations. We make sure it never leaves this room." The official report stated that Benjamin Hale died of a sudden cardiac event. No family, no next of kin. Body cremated per standard procedure. The ashes were scattered in an undisclosed location. Dr. Chen left Whitmore Hospital 2 weeks later. He couldn't explain what had happened. Couldn't reconcile what he'd seen with what he'd been taught. But Nora stayed. She stayed because she understood something the others didn't. Late at night, when the hospital was quiet, Nora would stand outside the room where Benjamin had died. Sometimes she heard them. Faint, distant, muffled. The voices still screaming, still trapped. Not in a body anymore, but in the walls, the floor, the very air of the room that was now permanently sealed, marked as under renovation, do not enter. A room that would never be opened again. Nora kept Benjamin's file in her desk, along with the files of his grandfather, his great-grandfather, all the vessels who had come before. She didn't know if it was mercy, keeping them contained, or if it was cruelty, but she knew one thing. Some cages aren't meant to punish. They're meant to protect, to keep something dangerous from escaping, to keep the world safe from what lives in the spaces between life and death. And sometimes, late at night, when Nora closed her eyes, she could hear them. Not just Benjamin's voices, new ones, softer, weaker, just beginning to form. And she wondered if the containment had truly worked, or if she had simply become the next vessel, the next prison, the next generation cursed to carry what others could not bear. Fear doesn't always look like monsters. Sometimes it looks like mercy. Sometimes the cage is an act of love. And sometimes the only way to save the world is to let yourself become the prison. In criminal investigations, sometimes the smallest detail solves the case. A fiber, a fingerprint, a single strand of DNA. But in this case from April 2003, in rural Arizona, the key piece of evidence was even smaller. A steel wire, less than 1 inch long, implanted under a man's eye during facial surgery years earlier. That wire, buried with a burned and dismembered body, would identify a victim no one reported missing. And it would expose a murder so brutal, so calculated, that investigators said it was the worst domestic homicide they had ever seen. This is a true case. The details are taken from police reports, forensic analysis, court transcripts, and witness testimony. I have changed some names, but everything else is exactly as documented. This is the story of Daniel Anderson, and the wife who dismembered him while he was still alive. April 28, 2003, Yavapai County, Arizona. 5:11 in the evening. An anonymous call came into the Prescott Valley Sheriff's Station. A man's voice, panicked, breathless. He said he had found a severed head on the dry riverbed of the Verde River. Before the dispatcher could ask his name, the call disconnected. Deputies arrived at the scene within 15 minutes. The Verde River was completely dry, the bed cracked and dusty. And there, lying on the ground, near a concrete pillar, was a human head. It had been badly burned. The skin was charred black. The features were unrecognizable. Near the head, deputies found a burlap sack, a plastic bag, and a thick cloth. There was blood on the ground, but not much. The question was immediate. Where was the rest of the body? Deputies spread out along the riverbed. About 2 kilometers downstream, they found a blood-soaked, long-sleeved shirt, a pillowcase, a plastic table cover, and 2 more plastic bags. All of them had blood on them. Then, a radio call. A local rancher named Barry Daniels had called to report a strange smell coming from the well on his property. Deputies drove to the ranch. With the help of several volunteers, they tied a rope to an iron hook and lowered it into the well. They pulled up a large bundle wrapped in sheets. When they opened it, they found a naked human torso. It had been burned extensively. The abdomen had been cut open. The intestines were hanging out. The smell was overwhelming. Several people vomited. The head and torso were taken to the medical examiner's office in Prescott. The autopsy confirmed they belonged to the same person. Male. Age estimated between 30 and 40. Cause of death: blood loss and blunt force trauma. But there was no identification. No one in the area had reported anyone missing. The body was badly decomposed, burned, and dismembered. The medical examiner could not identify it. After holding the remains for 4 days, the sheriff's department cremated the body and stored the evidence. On May 3rd, the sheriff's department called local newspapers and asked them to run a story. The headline read, "Unidentified body found in Verda River, burned and dismembered." The article included one detail. The victim had a steel wire implanted under the left eye, likely from facial surgery. That detail would change everything. 120 kilometers away, in the town of Sedona, a man named Robert Anderson was reading the newspaper over morning coffee. Robert was in his 60s, a retired electrician. He had 3 sons. The youngest, Daniel, had been out of contact for over a week. Robert had been calling Daniel's phone. No answer. He had gone to Daniel's business, a marble and stone supply company. Daniel had not been there. His wife, Claire Anderson, was running the business instead. Robert had asked Claire where Daniel was. Claire told him to mind his own business. She said if Robert was so worried he could come to the warehouse, but he was not welcome at their house. Robert was confused. Daniel had always been close with his family. He called every few days. He visited at least once a month. This silence was unusual. Robert had asked relatives and friends to help find Daniel. No one had seen him. And now, reading the newspaper, Robert felt a cold weight in his stomach. The steel wire under the left eye. Daniel had that. When Daniel was 19, he had been in a car accident. His cheekbone was fractured. Robert had taken him to a specialist in Phoenix, a surgeon named Dr. Marcus Klein. Dr. Klein had used a steel wire to reattach the bone. It was a rare procedure. Robert remembered it vividly. And now, a body with the same wire had been found. Robert called his other sons. He called his daughter-in-law, Claire. He told them about the newspaper article. They all agreed to go to the sheriff's station. When they arrived, Robert explained that his son, Daniel Anderson, had been missing for over a week. He told them about the steel wire. The deputies were skeptical. A steel wire under the eye was unusual, but it did not prove anything. They told Robert the body had already been cremated. There was no way to visually identify it. But they still had the evidence. They brought out bags containing the shirt, the burlap sack, the plastic bags, and the steel wire. Claire Anderson, Daniel's wife, had been standing in the station looking calm, detached. But when the deputies laid out the evidence, her expression changed. She looked at the shirt, at the bags, at the wire, and tears started falling. She began crying loudly. She said the shirt was Daniel's. She said the bags were from their house. The deputies now suspected the body was Daniel Anderson. But they needed confirmation. Robert told them about Dr. Klein, a surgeon who had performed the procedure. The deputies called Dr. Klein in Phoenix. Dr. Klein confirmed the surgery. He said he was the only specialist in Arizona who used that type of steel wire for facial reconstruction. He said he had only performed that procedure on 3 patients in the past 20 years. He gave the deputies the names of all 3. 2 of them were still alive. The 3rd was Daniel Anderson. The body in the well was Daniel. Now the question was, who killed him? The first suspect was Claire, but deputies were confused. Claire was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall. Daniel had been 6 feet 2, over 200 pounds. How could she have overpowered him? How could she have dismembered his body? And they had 2 young children. Why would a mother do something so brutal? The deputies began interviewing everyone. Daniel's family, Claire's family, friends, neighbors. employees at the marble company. Everyone said the same thing. Daniel and Claire fought constantly. Their marriage was falling apart. Claire's brother, a man named Thomas Hayes, had called Daniel several times in the weeks before he disappeared. Thomas would say, "You are not treating my sister right. You need to do better." The deputies brought Thomas in for questioning. At first, he said he knew nothing. But after hours of interrogation, watching his sister cry in the next room, Thomas broke. He said, "Talk to Claire. She knows what happened." Claire was brought into the interrogation room. She sat down, and after a long silence, she confessed. She said, "I killed my husband. I killed Daniel Anderson." The detectives asked her why. Claire said she suspected Daniel was cheating on her. She said he traveled to Las Vegas and Phoenix frequently for work. She thought he was seeing other women. She had no proof, but the suspicion consumed her. She also believed Daniel was planning to give all his money and property to his family, to his parents and brothers. She thought she and her children would be left with nothing. So, she decided to kill him. And she did not do it alone. She had help. Daniel's driver, a man named Brian Torres, had been Daniel's friend for years. But he was also Claire's friend. Claire convinced Brian to help her. She told him she would forgive the car loan Daniel had given him. She would give him extra money. And Brian agreed. On April 26, 2003, between 7 and 7:30 in the evening, Claire mixed sleeping pills into Daniel's juice. Daniel drank it and became unconscious. Claire called Brian. He arrived at the house with an axe. They laid Daniel on the kitchen table, and Brian began striking him with the axe. 10 blows. 15 blows. To the head, the neck, the chest. But Daniel did not die. He started regaining consciousness. He was groaning, moving slightly. Brian panicked and struck him 5 more times. Daniel's neck bone cracked, but his head was still attached. So, Claire took a kitchen knife and began cutting. Slowly, like carving meat. She sawed through the tendons, the muscles, the remaining bone. And when she finally separated Daniel's head from his body, blood erupted. It sprayed across the kitchen. Claire ran and got a plastic container, the kind used for drinking water. She held it under Daniel's neck and squeezed, collecting the blood as it poured out. She filled 3 containers, nearly 4 liters of blood. They were not finished. They dragged Daniel's body to the basement and tried to burn it, but the fire did not spread. So they took the head to the roof. Claire turned on a gas burner, and she placed Daniel's head directly on the flame. She held it there as the hair caught fire, as the skin blistered and charred, as the skull blackened. She wanted to make sure no one could identify him. After the head was completely burned, they removed Daniel's clothes and bagged them separately. They loaded everything into Claire's car. The head, the torso, the clothes, the axe, the blood containers. It was 2 in the morning. They drove toward the desert. They planned to dump everything in the Verde River. But as they approached the riverbed, they saw headlights. A sheriff's patrol car. Brian panicked. He told Claire they needed to get rid of the body immediately. They saw a well and threw the torso in. They threw the head and clothes in different locations along the riverbed. And they buried the containers of blood in a remote area near a place called Red Rock. Then they drove back to Sedona. Claire cleaned the house. She went to work the next day as if nothing had happened. When the detectives finished taking Claire's statement, they asked her where the murder weapon was. She led them to the location. They found the axe buried under a juniper tree. They also found the blood containers where she said they would be. And then, the detectives went to Daniel's house. In his office, they found a journal. Daniel had kept a daily journal for years. He wrote about his life, his work, his marriage. And what the detectives read in that journal was heartbreaking. Page 134. May 15th, 2002. Daniel wrote, Claire has been demanding a divorce since this morning. I refused. She threatened to leave the house. I tried to stop her, but she pushed me away. I told her we could go to court. I even called the courthouse in front of her, knowing they close at 1 in the afternoon. We arrived at 1, and they were closed. Claire insisted we go to a lawyer. We went. The lawyer tried to talk us out of it. Claire eventually left and drove to Phoenix on her motorcycle. I searched for her, but could not find her. When I got home, I learned that Claire had locked both our children inside the house with no supervision and left. She came back at 11 at night. Page 139. May 20th, 2002. Claire confronted me about telling her parents about her behavior. She said I was ruining her reputation. She threatened me. She said either I close my business or she will have me fired. She said she will file false charges against me. Page 154. June 4th, 2002. Daniel wrote, I am afraid I am being poisoned. I do not know what she is putting in my food. My tongue feels numb. I cannot taste anything. The final entry in the journal was dated April 25th, 2003, the day before Daniel was murdered. It read, I called my father today. I told him I was coming home to visit, but I never made it. On the last page, there were stains. The forensic team tested them. They were dried tears. Daniel had been crying when he wrote that final entry. He knew something was wrong. He knew his wife was dangerous. But he stayed. Maybe for the children. Maybe because he still loved her. Maybe because he thought he could fix things. And it got him killed. Claire Anderson and Brian Torres were both charged with first-degree murder. The trial took place in 2004. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The steel wire. The journal. Claire's confession. The forensic analysis showing Daniel's blood in the house, in the car, on the axe. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Both Claire and Brian were found guilty. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Daniel's parents were granted custody of the children. The marble business was sold. The money went into a trust for the children. But in 2024, after serving 21 years, Claire Anderson was released. Her sentence was reduced for good behavior. And now, she is fighting her own children in court. She wants half of the business, half of the trust, half of everything that belonged to the man she murdered. The children, now adults, are fighting back. The case is ongoing. This case is horrifying for many reasons, but the detail that haunts me most is the blood. Claire did not just kill her husband. She collected his blood, nearly 4 liters of it. She squeezed it out of his body like juice from fruit, and she stored it in containers. Why? The detectives never got a clear answer. Claire said she did it to avoid leaving evidence in the house. But that does not make sense. She burned the house down later anyway. Some forensic psychologists believe Claire collected the blood as a trophy, a keepsake, a way to hold on to the power she felt in that moment. Others believe it was purely practical. She thought if she drained all the blood, the body would decompose faster. Either way, it is a level of brutality that goes beyond rage. It is methodical. It is calculated. It is evil. And the fact that she did it with her husband's friend, a man Daniel trusted, makes it even worse. Brian Torres was Daniel's driver. Daniel had helped Brian buy a car. Daniel had given him work. And Brian repaid that kindness by helping murder him. That is the kind of betrayal that destroys your faith in people. The journal entries are what break me. Daniel wrote about his fear. He wrote about the abuse. He wrote about suspecting he was being poisoned. And no one helped him. No one saw the signs. Or maybe they did, and they ignored them. Because when a man says his wife is abusing him, people do not take it seriously. They laugh. They say he's exaggerating. They say he should just leave. But Daniel had children. He had a business. He had a life. And leaving is not always simple, especially when you are being manipulated, threatened, and poisoned. Daniel stayed because he thought he could fix things, and his wife killed him for it. Then she burned his body, dismembered it, and threw it in a well. And she would have gotten away with it if not for one tiny steel wire. That wire, implanted years earlier to fix a broken bone, became the evidence that identified his body. It became the chain that linked Claire to the crime, and it became the reason she is in prison. But now she is out. After 21 years, Claire is free, and she wants money. The money that belonged to the man she murdered, the business he built, the property he owned. She thinks she deserves it, and legally, she might have a claim. Because in Arizona, even convicted murderers can inherit from their victims under certain circumstances. The children are fighting it. They are arguing that Claire forfeited any claim when she murdered their father. But the law is complicated, and Claire has lawyers. Good lawyers. And she might win. That is the system we live in. A woman can murder her husband, dismember his body, dump it in a well, serve 20 years, and then sue for his money. And the courts will hear her case. That is not justice. That is insanity. I want to end with a message. If you are in a relationship where you feel afraid, where you suspect you are being poisoned or harmed, where your partner threatens you or isolates you, get out. Do not stay for the children. Do not stay for the business. Do not stay because you think you can fix it. You cannot fix someone who wants to hurt you. Daniel tried, and he died. Do not be the next Daniel. Trust your instincts and leave. If this story affected you, share it. Let people know that domestic violence happens to men too. Let them know that abuse is not always visible. Let them know that sometimes the person you trust most is the person who will hurt you worst. Daniel's story should not be forgotten, and neither should the thousands of others like him who never got justice. According to folklore from around the world, certain floor numbers are considered cursed. In China, Japan, and Korea, the fourth floor is avoided because the word for four sounds like the word for death. Many buildings skip from the third floor directly to the fifth. In Western countries, the 13th floor is omitted. Hotels, hospitals, office buildings, all following the same superstition. But sometimes, a floor is cursed not because of numerology, but because of what happened there. This story takes place in November 20th, 25, in a high-rise apartment complex in downtown Chicago. It involves a real estate agent, a vacant apartment, and a floor that should have been demolished years ago. The events were captured on security camera footage and corroborated by multiple witnesses. The building management tried to keep it quiet, but the video leaked online. And once you see what happened on the fourth floor of the Star Galaxy Apartments, you will never take an elevator alone again. This is the documented case of Flat 402, and the man who entered it by mistake. The Star Galaxy Apartments is a 20-story residential building on North Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. It was built in 1978 during the city's construction boom. Luxury condos with views of Lake Michigan. By 2025, the building had changed ownership multiple times. The current management company, Lakeview Properties, inherited a problem when they purchased the building in 2019. The fourth floor. Every unit on the fourth floor had been vacant since 2003. 22 years. Empty. The reason was simple. Between 1998 and 2003, 7 people died in apartments on the fourth floor. 2 suicides. 3 heart attacks. 1 stroke. 1 unexplained death, ruled as cardiac arrest in sleep. All natural causes, according to the medical examiner. But the tenants knew better. People who lived on the fourth floor reported the same things. Doors opening and closing by themselves. Lights flickering. Shadows moving in peripheral vision. Voices coming from empty rooms. And a feeling A presence. Something watching. By 2003, every tenant on the fourth floor had either moved out or died, and no one would rent there anymore. Lakeview Properties tried to renovate. They repainted the walls, replaced the carpets, installed new fixtures. But every contractor they hired quit within days. They reported the same experiences. Doors slamming, tools disappearing, cold spots in rooms with working heat, and the voices. Always the voices. Whispering, calling names, saying wake up. Eventually, management gave up. They sealed the fourth floor. The elevators were programmed to skip it. The button for the fourth floor in the elevator panel was disabled. The stairwell access was locked. The fourth floor became a ghost floor, existing on paper, but inaccessible in reality. And for 22 years it stayed that way. Until November 7th, 2025. When a real estate agent named David Richardson made a terrible mistake. David Richardson was 34 years old. He worked for a small real estate firm specializing in rental properties in downtown Chicago. On the afternoon of November 7th, David received a call from his friend and colleague, Brian Moss. Brian said he had a great deal for David's client, a man named Marcus who was looking for a one-bedroom apartment. The property was in the Star Galaxy building, 5th floor, flat 502. The rent was reasonable. The view was excellent. David agreed to meet Brian at 6 in the evening to view the apartment. But when David arrived at the building at 5:45, there was no one in the lobby. No doorman. No Brian. David called Brian's number. The call connected, but immediately broke up. Static. Garbled words. David heard Brian say something about the Star Galaxy. Something about floor. Something about O2. Then the call dropped. David tried calling back. No answer. He sent a text. What floor? Which flat? No response. David looked around the lobby. The building was eerily quiet. He checked his watch. 5:50. He decided to go up and wait for Brian. But he did not know which floor. The call had been unclear. Was it the fourth floor? The fifth? He thought he heard Brian say, O2. So, it was flat something, O2. Probably 502, David thought. 5th floor. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button. The elevator arrived. David stepped inside. The panel showed buttons for floors 1 through 20. But David noticed something. The button for the fourth floor was there. It was not disabled. It looked like every other button. David assumed the fourth floor was accessible. He did not know the building's history. He pressed the button for the 5th floor, but his fingers slipped. He pressed 4 instead. The elevator doors closed. The elevator began to rise. 1, 2, 3, 4. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. David stepped out into a dark hallway. The lights were off. The air smelled stale, musty, like a place that had been closed for a long time. David pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. He looked at the apartment numbers on the doors. 401, 403, 405. He walked down the hall looking for 402. And then he found it. Flat 402. The door was slightly ajar. David knocked. No answer. He called out, Mr. Moss? Ryan? No response. David pushed the door open. It creaked loudly. Inside, the apartment was pitch black. David shone his flashlight into the darkness. The beam illuminated a living room. Empty. No furniture. Dust on the floor. David took a step inside. And that is when he heard it. A giggle. Faint. Childlike. Coming from somewhere deeper in the apartment. David froze. He called out again. Hello? Is someone here? Silence. Then footsteps. Soft. padding across the floor, moving toward him. David's heart started pounding. He backed toward the door. But then the door slammed shut by itself. David spun around. He tried the handle. Locked. He pulled. Nothing. He was trapped inside. The apartment was completely dark except for his phone's flashlight. And then the light started flickering. On, off. On, off. Like the power was failing. But this was a phone. It should not flicker like that. David's hands were shaking. He turned toward the living room. And standing in the doorway to the kitchen was a figure. A shadow. Tall. Human-shaped. But wrong. The proportions were off. The limbs too long. The head tilted at an unnatural angle. David tried to scream. Nothing came out. The figure started moving toward him. Slowly. Gliding across the floor without walking. David backed against the wall. The figure stopped inches from his face. And then it spoke. Rajesh. The voice was a whisper. Raspy. Layered. Like multiple voices speaking at once. David's phone went dark. He was in complete blackness. He could feel the presence in front of him. Cold. So cold it hurt. He tried to move. His body would not respond. Paralyzed. The presence leaned closer. He felt breath on his face. Breath that smelled like rot. Like death. And then the whisper again. Rajesh. Wake up. David snapped. He threw himself sideways, breaking free from the paralysis. He stumbled across the room and in the dark, hitting furniture that should not have been there. His phone light came back on. He looked around. The apartment was not empty. There was furniture everywhere. A couch. A table. A lamp. Things that had not been there seconds ago. And sitting on the couch was a man. He was facing away from David. Just sitting. Motionless. David backed toward the door. He reached for the handle. It turned. The door opened. Light flooded in from the hallway. David ran. He sprinted down the hall toward the elevator. Behind him he heard the apartment door creak open. He heard footsteps. Fast. Coming after him. David reached the elevator and slammed his hand on the button. The doors opened immediately. He jumped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors started to close. And in the last second before they shut, David saw it. The figure, standing at the end of the hall, watching him. The elevator descended. David was gasping, sweating, shaking. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he stumbled out into the lobby. And there was Brian, standing near the entrance, talking on his phone. Brian saw David and smiled. Hey, there you are. I have been trying to call you. David stared at him. You told me to meet you here. What floor? Which flat? Brian looked confused. I said 5th floor. Flat 502. David, are you okay? You look like you have seen a ghost. David did not answer. He pushed past Brian and walked out of the building. He got in his car and drove home. He did not take Brian's calls. He did not go back to work for 3 days. When he finally did return, he told Brian he was quitting real estate. He said he was moving to a different city. Brian thought he was having a breakdown. But David knew better. He had been in flat 402, and whatever was in there had seen him, had spoken to him, had called him by a name that was not his. Rajesh. Who was Rajesh? David researched the Star Galaxy building. He found old newspaper articles. In 2001, a man named Rajesh Patel had lived in flat 402. He died in his sleep. Cardiac arrest. Age 36. No known health issues. The medical examiner found no cause. Rajesh's body was discovered by building maintenance after neighbors reported a smell. He had been dead for 5 days. But here is the disturbing part. According to the police report, when they found Rajesh, his eyes were open, and his face was frozen in an expression of terror. David never went back to the Star Galaxy building, but the building's security cameras captured something that night. The footage was leaked by a former employee in 2026. It shows David entering the elevator at 5:49 in the evening. It shows him pressing a button. The elevator rises. The doors open on the 4th floor. David steps out. The hallway cameras show him walking down the hall. He stops at flat 402. The door is closed, but as David approaches, it slowly swings open. David hesitates. Then he steps inside. The camera loses sight of him. For exactly 7 minutes, nothing happens. Then at 5:56, David comes running out of the apartment. He is sprinting. His face is white. He reaches the elevator and gets in. The doors close. But here is what the camera also captured. After David gets in the elevator, the camera angle shifts slightly. You can see down the hallway, and standing in the doorway of flat 402 is a figure. Tall, shadowy, motionless. It stands there for 10 seconds. Then it steps back into the apartment, and the door closes by itself. The video went viral. Paranormal investigators analyzed it. Skeptics called it fake, but the building management confirmed it was real, unedited security footage. They also confirmed that the 4th floor had been sealed for over 20 years. The elevator should not have stopped there. The button should have been disabled. But on the night of November 7th, 2025, the elevator malfunctioned, and David Richardson got off on the wrong floor. Other people have reported similar experiences. A maintenance worker in 2022 claimed he was sent to check a leak on the 4th floor. He found the stairwell door unlocked. When he entered, he heard voices. He saw shadows moving. He left immediately and refused to go back. A tenant on the 5th floor in 2024 said she sometimes hears footsteps above her at 3 in the morning. But there is no one living above her. That is the 4th floor, and it has been empty for over 2 decades. The Star Galaxy management has since sealed the elevator access permanently. They removed the 4th floor button entirely. They installed additional locks on the stairwell doors. But people who live in the building say it does not matter. The 4th floor is still there, and whatever is on the 4th floor is still active. This case is terrifying because it involves something we all do every day. We enter elevators. We press buttons. We trust that the building is safe. But what if you press the wrong button? What if the elevator takes you to a floor that should not exist? A floor that has been abandoned. A floor where something is waiting. David Richardson made a simple mistake. He pressed 4 instead of 5. And he ended up in a place that has been closed for 22 years. He encountered something that should not be there. Something that knew a name. Rajesh. The man who died in that apartment. The man whose eyes were open when they found him. As if he had seen something in his final moments. Something so terrifying it stopped his heart. What did Rajesh see? What did David see? We will never know for certain. But the security footage is clear. There was something in flat 402. Something that opened the door. Something that chased David out. Something that stood watching as he fled. And it is still there, waiting for the next person who presses the wrong button. If you live in a high-rise building, check the elevator panel. See if there is a floor that is skipped. A floor where the button is missing or disabled. Ask the building management why. Most of the time, it is just superstition. But sometimes, there is a reason. A history. Something that happened there that made people leave and never come back. And if you ever find yourself on a floor that feels wrong, a floor where the lights do not work, where the air smells old, where you hear sounds that should not be there, do not investigate. Do not open doors. Get back in the elevator. Leave immediately. Because some places are empty for a reason, and the things that remain there do not want visitors. They want something else. They want you to stay. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Do not ignore the signs. Fear doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it protects. Sometimes the monsters in the walls are the only things keeping the real monsters out. Carolyn Harper knew the house was too cheap for a reason, but she didn't expect the reason to be watching them from the walls. The real estate listing had been straightforward. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, Victorian architecture with original hardwood floors, prime location in the suburbs of Ridgemont, and priced 40% below market value. It's been on and off the market for 15 years, the agent had explained. Families move in, then move out within months, sometimes weeks, never stay longer than a year. Why? Daniel had asked. The agent had shrugged. They never say. Just sudden relocations,
job transfers,
family emergencies. The usual. But Carolyn had seen something flicker in the woman's eyes. Something that looked like relief when they signed the papers. They moved in on a Saturday in late September. The children, Emma and Lucas, ran through the empty rooms, their voices echoing off high ceilings. Daniel carried boxes up the stairs while Carolyn stood in the foyer, looking up at the chandelier. It was beautiful, crystal and brass, probably 100 years old, but it was swaying, just slightly, even though there was no breeze. Mom? Emma appeared beside her. Why does the house smell like rain? Carolyn inhaled. Emma was right. There was a dampness in the air. Not mildew. Not rot. Fresh rain. As if a storm had just passed through. But it had been sunny all day. The first night was quiet. They ate pizza on the living room floor. Unpacked essentials. Put the children to bed in their new rooms. Daniel and Carolyn collapsed into their own bed around midnight. Best decision we ever made, Daniel said, already half asleep. The kids love it. It's perfect. Carolyn didn't answer. She was staring at the bedroom door. It was open. Just a crack. She was certain they'd closed it. At 2:37 a.m., Carolyn woke to the sound of water. Dripping. Steady. Rhythmic. She sat up, listening. It was coming from the hallway. She climbed out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Daniel, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, but even in the darkness, she could see them. Wet footprints, leading from the top of the stairs, down the hall, stopping directly outside her bedroom door. Carolyn's breath caught. The footprints were fresh, water still pooling in the impressions left by bare feet, adult-sized feet, but no one was there. She woke Daniel. "Look," she whispered. "Someone's been in the house." Daniel rubbed his eyes, squinted at the hallway. "I don't see anything." The footprints. Right there. There. But when Carolyn looked again, the hallway floor was dry. Completely dry. No water. No footprints. Nothing. Daniel touched her shoulder. "You're exhausted. Moving stress. Come back to bed." Carolyn let him guide her back. But she didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the house settle, and wondering why the air still smelled like rain. The next morning, Carolyn found something in the basement. She'd gone down to check the water heater, and found a small door hidden behind old shelving. The door was locked, but when she pulled on it, the wood was so rotted it simply crumbled. Inside was a room. Not a storage room. Not a utility space. A shrine. The walls were covered in photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white. Faded with age. All of the same family. A man. A woman. 3 children, standing in front of this house. The photographs were arranged in circles, and in the center of each circle Words carved directly into the stone wall. Protection through fear. What they dread will guard them. The pact is sealed. At the bottom, a name and date carved deeper than the rest. Edmund Fletcher, 1953. Carolyn took photos with her phone. Researched the name when she got back upstairs. Edmund Fletcher had owned the house from 1948 until his death in 1953. He'd been found in the basement. Cause of death, drowning. But there had been no water in the basement. His lungs were full of water. His body soaked. But the room was completely dry. The coroner had ruled it an unexplained death. The family had moved out immediately after the funeral. And since then, every family who'd lived in the house had left within a year. That night, the footprints returned. But this time, Daniel saw them too. He woke at 3 a.m., gasping for air, clawing at his throat. "Can't breathe," he choked. "Can't. Water. I'm drowning." Carolyn grabbed him. "Daniel, you're not drowning. You're in bed. But Daniel's eyes were wild, terrified. He was staring at something behind her. Carolyn turned. The bedroom door was open, and standing in the doorway was a figure. It was made of water. Not solid, not liquid. Something in between. A shape that held the form of a man, but constantly shifting, constantly dripping. It had no face, just the suggestion of features. Eyes that were hollow pools. A mouth that was an empty void. And it was watching Daniel. Carolyn screamed. The children's doors burst open. Emma and Lucas ran into the hallway, then froze. "Mom?" Emma's voice was tiny. "Why is there a man made of water?" Lucas started crying. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching Daniel with those hollow eyes. And then it stepped backward, into the hallway. The wet footprints appeared wherever it moved. And then it was gone. Simply dissolved, leaving only puddles on the hardwood floor. They should have left that night. Packed a car. Driven to a hotel. Put the house back on the market. But they didn't. Because when morning came, Daniel's lifelong fear of drowning was gone. Completely gone. He stood at the bathroom sink, splashing water on his face, and realized he felt nothing. No panic. No tightness in his chest. No memories of nearly drowning as a child. The fear that had haunted him for 35 years had vanished. "It took it," he whispered. "Whatever that thing was, it took my fear." Carolyn went back to the basement. She studied the shrine. Read the carved words over and over. Protection through fear. What they dread will guard them. Edmund Fletcher had made a pact. Carolyn understood that now. He'd been desperate to protect his family from something. Some curse. Some threat. So, he'd done the unthinkable. He'd turned their deepest fears into physical forms. Into guardians. His wife's fear of fire. His son's fear of heights. His daughter's fear of the dark. And his own fear of drowning. He'd given the house their terror. Let it take root. Let it become alive. And now, the house protected anyone who lived within its walls. By manifesting their fears. By making the nightmares real. And then, by consuming them. Over the next week, the manifestations continued. Emma saw spiders. Hundreds of them. Crawling up her bedroom walls. Covering her ceiling. But, after that night, her arachnophobia disappeared. Lucas heard whispers. Voices in his closet telling him terrible things. But, after 3 nights, the voices stopped. And his fear of the dark was gone. Carolyn saw her mother. Dead for 5 years. Standing at the foot of her bed. Reaching for her with rotting hands. And then, her grief was lighter. Manageable. No longer the crushing weight it had been. The house was healing them, taking their fears, consuming their traumas, leaving them lighter. But at what cost? Carolyn found more documentation in the basement. Old journals, letters, records kept by Edmund Fletcher in the months before his death. "The pack demands a price," he wrote. "The fears manifest. They guard. They protect. But they also hunger. They need to feed. And if there are no fears left to consume, they turn on the house itself, on the family within." The final entry was dated the night before he died. "I have run out of fears to give. My family is free. But I'm not. The guardian I created, the water that haunts my dreams, has come for me. I welcome it. Better me than my children. Better this than whatever curse would have taken us." Daniel found Carolyn reading in the basement. "We need to leave," he said. "This isn't natural. This isn't safe." "But the fears are gone," Carolyn said quietly. "All of them. Emma, Lucas, you, me. We're free. At what price? What happens when we run out of fears? What happens when the house has nothing left to consume?" Carolyn looked at the shrine, at Edmund Fletcher's photograph, at the expression on his face, resigned, accepting, peaceful. "Then someone makes the choice he made," she whispered. "Someone offers themselves to keep the others safe." That night, the water figure appeared again, but it wasn't watching Daniel anymore. It was watching Carolyn. She stood in the bedroom doorway, looking at it, understanding what it wanted. "You need to feed," she said. "You need fear. And I have one left. One I haven't faced." The figure tilted its head, waiting. "I'm afraid of losing them," Carolyn whispered. "My family. My children. I'm afraid of failing them. Of not being enough. Of making the wrong choice and destroying everything." The figure moved closer. Carolyn didn't run. She stood perfectly still as it approached, as it reached out with hands made of water, as it touched her face. And she felt it then, the fear leaving her body, being pulled out like poison from a wound. The constant anxiety, the perpetual worry, the crushing responsibility, all of it flowing out of her into the guardian. And when it was gone, when the figure stepped back and dissolved, Carolyn felt free. The next morning, the house was quiet. The children played in the yard. Daniel made breakfast. Carolyn sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, feeling lighter than she had in years. But she could feel it too. The presence, the guardians, the manifestations of fear that now lived within the walls. They were watching, waiting, protecting. As long as the family stayed, as long as they provided what the house needed, they would be safe, guarded by the very things that once terrified them. A real estate agent called that afternoon. "I have a family interested in viewing the property," she said. "Are you still planning to sell?" Carolyn looked around the kitchen, at the children laughing, at Daniel smiling for the first time in months, at the walls that held secrets, at the floors that remembered footprints, at the air that still smelt faintly of rain. "No," Carolyn said quietly. "We're staying. This is home." She hung up, and somewhere in the house, something dripped. Steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, like a promise. The Harper family would never leave the house on Mercer Lane. Not because they couldn't, but because they understood what few others had. Some protections come with a price. Some safety requires sacrifice. And sometimes, the only way to keep your family safe is to live inside the cage that was built from nightmares, guarded by fear itself, forever. Habeas corpus is Latin for "you shall have the body." It is one of the oldest legal protections in existence, dating back to the Magna Carta in 1215. It means that if someone is being held against their will, they can petition a court to demand their release. The government must either provide legal justification for the detention or set the person free. It is meant to prevent unlawful imprisonment. It is meant to protect individual liberty. It is meant to ensure that no one, not even your own family, can cage you without cause. But, like all laws, habeas corpus only works if the people enforcing it actually care. If the police decide to look the other way, if the courts rubber stamp whatever they are told, if society values tradition over freedom, then the law becomes meaningless. It becomes words on paper, and people die. This case happened in June 20th, 25, in rural Texas. It involves an 18-year-old woman, her family, a corrupt sheriff's department, and a legal petition that should have saved her life, but instead sealed her fate. I have changed some names, but every other detail is exactly as documented in court records, police reports, and witness testimony. This is the story of Christina Hartley and how the law failed to protect her. Riverdale is a small town in rural Texas, population about 3,000. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where family name matters, where tradition is sacred. The Hartley family had lived in Riverdale for generations. Thomas Hartley, Christina's father, was a respected figure in the community. He owned an electrical supply business. He served on the town council. People looked up to him. Christina was his only daughter. She was 18 years old in June 2025. She was smart, ambitious, determined. She had just taken the MCAT, the medical college admission test required for medical school. Her score was 478. It was a significant improvement from her previous attempt, where she scored 380. Christina was thrilled. With that score, she was confident she would get into a good medical school. She wanted to be a doctor. She had wanted it her whole life. And now, finally, it seemed possible. But her father had other plans. In February 20th, 25, Christina had been living in Austin, about 200 miles from Riverdale. She was staying in a dormitory, attending a pre-med preparatory program. One evening, she was waiting at a bus stop, trying to get back to her dorm. The bus was late. It was getting dark. Christina had no choice but to ask for a ride. A young man named Anthony Walker stopped his motorcycle. He was 23 years old. He asked where she was going. She explained. He offered to give her a ride. Christina hesitated, but Anthony seemed friendly, trustworthy. She accepted. During the ride, they talked. By the time they reached her dorm, they had exchanged phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they started talking more. Texting, calling, meeting for coffee, and eventually they fell in love. Anthony was honest with Christina from the beginning. He told her he had been married before. He told her he had a child. He told her the marriage had failed, and he was separated. Christina appreciated his honesty. It made her trust him more. And over time, their relationship deepened. They talked about the future. They talked about getting married. They talked about building a life together. Christina was happy. She was studying hard, preparing for medical school, and spending her free time with someone she loved. Everything seemed perfect, until she went home. In early May 20th, 25, Christina returned to Riverdale to take the MCAT. After the exam, she planned to go back to Austin, but her family had different ideas. On May 5th, Thomas Hartley took Christina to a family wedding, or at least, that is what he told her. The real reason for the trip was to introduce Christina to a man named Daniel Morrison. Daniel was the brother-in-law of Christina's cousin. Thomas wanted Christina to meet Daniel, to consider marrying him. Christina was blindsided. She had never mentioned wanting to get married. She had never asked her father to arrange anything. She had plans. She had Anthony. She had medical school. But Thomas hardly did not care. In his mind, Christina's life was not her own to plan. He was the father. He would decide who she married, and she would obey. Christina refused. She told her father she was in love with someone else. She told him she wanted to marry Anthony. Thomas was furious. He felt betrayed. He felt disrespected. In his traditional mindset, a daughter's love for a man she chose was an insult to the family. It was a violation of his authority. It was unacceptable. Thomas began restricting Christina's movements. He took her phone away for days at a time. He refused to let her leave the house. He told her she would marry Daniel Morrison, and that was final. Christina's uncle, a man named Robert Hartley, encouraged Thomas. He said, "I told you this would happen. Girls go to college, they get boyfriends, they run away. This is what happens when you give them too much freedom." The pressure intensified. Thomas stopped Christina's education entirely. He told her she would not be going back to Austin. She would not be attending medical school. She would stay home and prepare for marriage. Christina was devastated. She watched her dreams crumble. She tried to reason with her father, but he would not listen. She tried to talk to her mother, but her mother sided with Thomas. Christina felt trapped. In desperation, she reached out to Anthony. She told him everything. She told him she could not take it anymore. She told him she wanted to run away. On June 4th, 25, Christina and Anthony executed their plan. Christina snuck out of the house while her family was distracted. Anthony picked her up. They drove to Albuquerque, New Mexico, about 500 miles away. There, they filed paperwork for a domestic partnership. It was not a marriage, but it was a legal recognition of their relationship. They stayed in hotels, traveling through New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. They visited Sedona, Flagstaff, Las Vegas. They were planning to settle somewhere far from Riverdale, somewhere Christina's family could not reach her. But they underestimated Thomas Hartley's reach. On June 5th, Thomas reported Christina missing. He filed a report with the Riverdale Sheriff's Department. He told them his daughter had been kidnapped. The sheriff, a man named Dale Crawford, was a longtime friend of Thomas. They went to church together. Their families knew each other. Sheriff Crawford immediately launched an investigation. He put out an alert for Christina. He tracked her phone. Within 2 days, Christina's phone pinged in Albuquerque, then Sedona, then Flagstaff, then Las Vegas. Sheriff Crawford sent teams to track her. On June 10th, Christina's phone location stopped moving. It was at a motel in Boulder City, Nevada. On the night of June 12th, Sheriff Crawford and 2 deputies arrived at the motel. Christina's brother, a man named Luke Hartley, was with them. They found Christina and Anthony in their room. Luke was enraged. He shouted at Christina. He called her names. The deputies seized both Christina's and Anthony's phones without a warrant. They separated the couple. They put Christina in one vehicle and Anthony in another. Christina was driven back to Riverdale. Anthony was taken to the sheriff's station. Sheriff Crawford searched old records and found an outstanding warrant for Anthony. It was a minor charge, failure to appear for a traffic violation. But it was enough. Anthony was arrested and jailed. The next day, June 13th, Christina was brought to the sheriff's station to give a statement. She was terrified. She'd been locked in her room since being brought home. Her father had yelled at her. Her uncle had lectured her. They told her she had brought shame on the family. They told her she would do as she was told. When Christina sat down with the deputies, she told them the truth. She said she wanted to be with Anthony. She said she had left of her own free will. But the deputies did not care. They told her if she did not change her statement, Anthony would suffer. They said they would file serious charges against him. They said he would spend years in prison. They said it was her choice. Either she cooperated, or Anthony would rot in jail. Christina broke down. She was 18 years old, isolated, terrified, and exhausted. She gave them the statement they wanted. She said she wanted to live with her family. The case was closed. But Anthony was not done fighting. On June 21st, after being released on bail, Anthony filed a habeas corpus petition in federal court. The petition argued that Christina was being held against her will by her family. It demanded that the Hartley family produce Christina in court and prove they had legal authority to detain her. If they could not, the court would order her release. The hearing was scheduled for June 27th. Anthony was hopeful. He believed the law would protect Christina. He believed the court would see what was happening. He believed she would be freed. But on June 27th, when the hearing took place, the Hartley family's attorney presented a document. It was a death certificate. Christina Hartley had died on June 25th, 2025. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. The court dismissed the case. Anthony was devastated. He could not believe Christina was dead. He went to Riverdale and asked around. Everyone confirmed it. She had died of a heart attack. She was buried in the family plot. But Anthony knew something was wrong. Christina was 18 years old. She was healthy. She did not have a heart condition. Heart attacks do not just happen to healthy 18-year-olds. Anthony went to the sheriff's department and filed a complaint. He accused the Hartley family of murdering Christina. Sheriff Crawford ignored him. Weeks passed. Finally, on July 31st, the state attorney general's office received an anonymous tip. The tip alleged that Christina had been murdered, and that local law enforcement had covered it up. The attorney general ordered an investigation. A state investigator named Susan Martinez was assigned to the case. She arrived in Riverdale on August 1st. Investigator Martinez started by interviewing the Hartley family. She spoke to Thomas, to Christina's mother Margaret, to her uncle Robert, to her cousin Nathan. Their stories did not match. There were inconsistencies, details that did not add up. Then Investigator Martinez showed them evidence that Anthony had provided. Text messages Christina had sent him on June 17th. Messages saying her family was forcing her to marry Daniel Morrison. Messages saying she was afraid. Messages saying, "If I do not agree to marry him, they will kill me." When Robert Hartley and his son Nathan saw those messages, they cracked. They confessed. They told Investigator Martinez what really happened. On June 24th, Sheriff Crawford came to the Hartley house to serve the habeas corpus petition. Thomas Hartley panicked. If Christina appeared in court, she would tell the judge she was being held against her will. She would be freed. And Thomas would be humiliated. His authority would be undermined. His reputation would be destroyed. He could not let that happen. That night, Thomas called his brother Robert. He told Robert they needed to deal with Christina. Robert agreed. He brought his son Nathan. The three of them went to Christina's room. They tried one last time to convince her to marry Daniel Morrison. Christina refused. She said she loved Anthony. She said she would tell the court the truth. That was when Thomas made his decision. He told Robert to go to the kitchen and bring sedatives. Robert crushed sleeping pills into a glass of milk. They forced Christina to drink it. Within minutes, she was unconscious. Thomas, Robert, and Nathan waited until the rest of the family was asleep. Then, at 1:30 in the morning, they entered Christina's room. Thomas strangled his daughter with his bare hands. She was unconscious from the sedatives. She did not fight. She died in her sleep. After killing her, the three men carried her body to a storage room. They staged a suicide. They hung her from a beam with a scarf around her neck. Then they went to their rooms and pretended to sleep. At 4 in the morning, they woke the rest of the family and led them to the storage room. They acted shocked. They said Christina had killed herself. The family, wanting to avoid scandal, agreed to say she died of a heart attack. No autopsy. No investigation. A quick burial. Thomas Hartley used his connections to obtain a false death certificate. He called in favors from a local doctor who owed him money. The doctor signed the certificate without ever seeing the body. Christina was buried within hours, and everyone in Riverdale agreed to stay silent. Big family honor mattered more than truth, because reputation mattered more than justice, because Christina was just a girl who did not know her place. On August 6th, 20th, 25, Investigator Martinez arrested Robert Hartley and Nathan Hartley. Thomas Hartley fled. He disappeared before the arrest warrant could be served. He has not been found. Robert and Nathan were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. They pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against Thomas if he is ever caught. They were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Sheriff Dale Crawford was investigated for corruption, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. He was fired and is currently facing federal charges. 3 of his deputies were also fired. The local doctor who falsified the death certificate had his medical license revoked and is facing criminal charges. But none of that brings Christina back. Christina Hartley was 18 years old. She had just scored well enough on the MCAT to get into medical school. She had her whole life ahead of her. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to marry the man she loved. She wanted freedom. And she was killed for it. By her own father. In her own home. While the local police looked the other way. And the most horrifying part is that this is not an isolated case. According to the United Nations, thousands of women are killed in honor killings every year worldwide. In the United States, the FBI estimates that at least 24 honor killings occur annually, though the true number is likely higher because many are never reported or are classified as suicides or accidents. The Department of Justice has documented cases in Texas, California, Arizona, New York, and Michigan. Most victims are young women between the ages of 16 and 25. Most are killed by male family members, usually fathers, brothers, or uncles. The reasons vary. Refusing an arranged marriage, dating someone the family disapproves of, seeking a divorce, wearing Western clothing, going to college. The common thread is control. Honor killings are about a family's perceived right to control a woman's body, her choices, her life. And when she defies that control, when she asserts her autonomy, she is killed. Not because she did anything wrong, but because her independence is seen as a threat to family honor. And in communities where honor is valued above all else, that threat must be eliminated. Christina's case is particularly disturbing because it highlights the role of law enforcement. Sheriff Crawford and his deputies were not neutral. They were not protecting Christina. They were helping her family imprison her. They confiscated her phone without a warrant. They coerced her into giving a false statement. They threatened Anthony to keep him quiet. They enabled her murder. And they did it because Sheriff Crawford valued his friendship with Thomas Hartley more than he valued Christina's rights. He valued community cohesion more than the law. He valued tradition more than justice. And Christina died because of it. This is what happens when law enforcement is corrupted by personal relationships. When sheriffs are elected and beholden to powerful families. When police see their role as maintaining order rather than protecting rights. The law becomes a tool of oppression. Habeas corpus becomes meaningless. And women like Christina have nowhere to turn. The habeas corpus petition Anthony filed should have saved Christina. It was filed on June 21st. The hearing was scheduled for June 27th. Christina was alive when the petition was filed. She was alive when it was served on her family. But on June 24th, when Thomas Hartley realized he would have to produce his daughter in court, he killed her. He killed her to avoid losing control. He killed her to protect his reputation. And the law, which was supposed to protect her, gave him the time to do it. Because the court did not act immediately. Because the sheriff's department did not intervene. Because no one prioritized Christina's safety over procedure. And she died. The habeas corpus petition became a death warrant. The legal process that should have freed her instead gave her family 3 days to silence her permanently. And by the time the hearing arrived, all that was left was a fake death certificate and a buried body. I think about the text messages Christina sent Anthony on June 17. She told him her family was going to force her to marry. She told him she was afraid. She told him they would kill her if she refused. And she was right. She knew what would happen. She saw it coming. And she tried to warn someone. She tried to ask for help. But no one listened. Anthony filed the petition. He did everything legally. He trusted the system. And the system failed Christina. It gave her family the opportunity to murder her. And then it let them cover it up. That is the real horror of this case. Not that a father killed his daughter. We know that happens. We know honor killings exist. The horror is that the institutions meant to protect her, the police, the courts, the legal system, all failed. They were either complicit or incompetent. And Christina paid with her life. There is another layer to this case that I cannot ignore. Christina was not just any victim. She was intelligent. She was educated. She had options. She scored high enough on the MCAT to get into medical school. She could have had a career. She could have been financially independent. She could have built a life on her own terms. And that is exactly why her family killed her. Because educated women are harder to control. Because women with careers do not need to rely on their families. Because independence is a threat to patriarchal authority. Christina's education was not a gift from her father. It was a miscalculation. Thomas Hartley thought sending Christina to college would make her more marriageable. He thought it would make her a better wife for whoever he chose. He did not expect her to develop her own ambitions. He did not expect her to fall in love. He did not expect her to want freedom. And when she did, when she asserted her right to choose her own path, he took that right away. Permanently. This is why honor killings are not just about tradition or culture. They are about power. They are about men who believe they own their daughters. Who believe a woman's autonomy is an insult to their authority. Who believe murder is justified if it restores their honor. And they are about societies that enable those men. That look the other way. That value family cohesion over individual rights. That protect patriarchs at the expense of women. Riverdale is not some isolated backwater. It is a town in Texas in 2025. It has internet. It has cell phones. It has access to the same information as anywhere else in the country. But it still operates on the principle that family honor is more important than a woman's life. And that should terrify all of us. Because if it can happen in Riverdale, it can happen anywhere. The legal failures in this case are staggering. Sheriff Crawford confiscated phones without a warrant. He coerced a false statement from a victim. He arrested Anthony on a pretextual charge to intimidate him. He failed to investigate a suspicious death. All of these are violations of constitutional rights. All of these are grounds for federal prosecution. And yet Sheriff Crawford operated with impunity for years. Because he was the law in Riverdale. Because no one questioned him. Because the people who could have held him accountable, the town council, the county commissioners, the state attorney general, all looked the other way. Until an anonymous tip forced them to act. That is the only reason this case was solved. Not because the system worked, but because someone, somewhere, decided to speak up. And even then, Thomas Hartley escaped. He is still out there. Somewhere. The man who strangled his own daughter is free. Living under a new name. In a new town. Maybe planning to do it again if another daughter disobeys. I want to talk about the death certificate. The false death certificate that Thomas Hartley obtained. In most jurisdictions, issuing a false death certificate is a serious crime. It is fraud. It is obstruction of justice. It undermines public health records. And yet, a local doctor did it as a favor. Because Thomas Hartley asked. Because Thomas had money. Because Thomas had connections. And that doctor thought family honor was more important than the truth. That doctor is now facing charges. His medical license has been revoked. But the damage is done. Christina was buried without an autopsy, without an investigation, without anyone questioning whether an 18-year-old girl really died of cardiac arrest, because the death certificate said so, and people trusted it. This is how cover-ups work, not through elaborate conspiracies, but through small acts of complicity. A doctor signs a form. A sheriff looks the other way. A community agrees to stay silent, and a murder becomes a natural death, and justice is buried along with the body. Let me be very clear about something. Christina Hartley was murdered, not by some stranger, not by some random act of violence, but by her own father, in her own home, while she slept, because she wanted to choose her own husband, because she wanted to go to medical school, because she wanted to live her own life. And the people who should have protected her, the police, the courts, the community, all failed. They enabled her murder. They covered it up. They let her killer escape. And they would have gotten away with it, if not for one anonymous tip. That is not justice. That is systemic failure. That is corruption. That is evil. And the worst part is, this is still happening. Right now. Somewhere in this country, a young woman is being told who she has to marry. Somewhere, a father is planning to kill his daughter for defying him. Somewhere, a police officer is looking the other way because he values his relationship with a powerful family more than his duty to uphold the law. And unless we change, unless we demand accountability, unless we make it clear that honor killings will not be tolerated, it will keep happening. More Christinas will die. More families will cover it up. More sheriffs will enable it. And more killers will escape. We have to do better. We have to protect women. We have to enforce the law. We have to hold corrupt officials accountable. Because if we do not, the law means nothing. Habeas corpus means nothing. And women like Christina Hartley will keep dying while the system that should protect them looks the other way. If you are reading this, and you know someone in a situation like Christina's, someone whose family is forcing them into marriage, someone who is afraid, someone who has sent you messages saying they might be killed, do not trust the local police. Go to the FBI. Go to the state attorney general. Go to a federal court. Because local law enforcement can be compromised. Local officials can be bought. Local communities can value tradition over justice. But federal authorities have no loyalty to small-town families. They have no reason to protect abusers. And they have the power to intervene. Christina sent Anthony a message on June 17th. She told him she was afraid. She told him her family would kill her. Anthony filed a habeas corpus petition. He did everything right. But he trusted the local system. And the local system betrayed Christina. Do not make that mistake. If someone you love is in danger, bypass the local authorities. Go straight to the top. Go to people who do not care about family honor, who do not care about community reputation, who only care about the law, because that is the only way to save them. Christina Hartley was 18 years old. She had dreams. She had plans. She had love. And she was murdered for wanting to live on her own terms. Her father, Thomas Hartley, is still free. Her uncle, Robert Hartley, and her cousin, Nathan Hartley, are in prison. Sheriff Dale Crawford is facing federal charges. The doctor who falsified her death certificate has lost his license. But none of that brings Christina back. None of that gives her the life she deserved. None of that makes up for the systemic failure that enabled her murder. The habeas corpus petition that should have saved her instead gave her family time to kill her. The police who should have protected her instead helped imprison her. The community that should have supported her instead stayed silent. And Christina died alone, strangled by her own father, buried in a lie. That is the horror. Not a supernatural monster. Not a random act of violence. But a system so corrupt, so broken, so willing to sacrifice women on the altar of family honor, that it turned a legal protection into a death sentence. That is the real monster. And it is still out there. Still killing. Still covering up. Still escaping justice. Unless we stop it. Unless we demand better. Unless we make it clear that no tradition, no family honor, no community reputation is worth more than a woman's life. Christina deserved better. The next Christina deserves better. We owe them that. We owe them justice. We owe them protection. We owe them the law, the real law. Not the corrupted version that failed Christina, but the law as it should be. Fair, impartial, protective. And if we cannot provide that, if we cannot guarantee that, then we have failed. And more women will die, and their blood will be on all of our hands. My name is Daniel Kershaw, and I am a 31-year-old bartender who survived a mass shooting at a rural bar in Bridgewater, Montana on Christmas Eve 2025. 3 people died that night. 7 more were injured, and I watched it all happen from behind the bar counter, where I'd been pouring drinks just moments before. This is what really happened. I had been working at the Frozen Pine for 2 years. It was the kind of place you find in small mountain towns. Nothing fancy, just a single-story building with wood paneling, a pool table in the corner, and locals who showed up every night like clockwork. We were 15 miles outside of town, surrounded by dense forest and snow-covered roads. In the winter, especially during storms, we became completely isolated. Cell service was spotty at best. The nearest police station was 40 minutes away on a good day. The Frozen Pine was not a place people stumbled into by accident. You went there because you lived nearby, because you knew someone who went there, because it was your place. Christmas Eve was always slow. Most people spent it with family. But there were always a few regulars who showed up, the ones with nowhere else to go, the ones who did not celebrate, the ones who preferred the company of strangers to relatives they had not spoken to in years. That night, we had maybe 12 people in the bar. Gary Mitchell, a 62-year-old retired mechanic who sat at the end of the counter every single night. Linda Hayes, a 40-something divorcee who nursed the same glass of wine for 2 hours while reading paperback novels. A handful of younger guys playing pool in the corner, laughing too loud, already half drunk. A couple sitting in a booth near the back, quietly talking, holding hands across the table. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Cole was 27 years old. He had started coming to the Frozen Pine about 6 months earlier, always alone, always ordering whiskey neat, always sitting in the same spot at the bar near the door. He was polite, but distant. He did not make small talk. He did not play pool or chat with the other regulars. He just sat there, drank slowly, and left after an hour or 2. I never thought much about him. Some people come to bars to socialize. Others come to be alone in public. Marcus seemed like the latter. But that night, something was different. He arrived around 8 p.m., earlier than usual. He was wearing a heavy winter coat, dark jeans, boots caked with snow. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, like he had been crying or had not slept in days. He sat down at his usual spot and ordered whiskey. I poured it for him. I said, "Quiet night, huh?" He did not respond. He just stared at the glass. Gary, sitting a few stools down, glanced over. He said, "You all right there, kid?" Marcus looked up at Gary. His jaw was tight. He said, "Do not talk to me." Gary raised his hands defensively. All right. Just asking." I felt a prickle of unease. Something was wrong, but I did not know what. I went back to wiping down glasses, keeping an eye on Marcus from the corner of my vision. He drank the whiskey in one swallow. Then he ordered another, and another. By 9 p.m., he had gone through 4 drinks. His hands were shaking. He kept looking at the door, then at the people in the bar, then back at the door. His breathing was shallow, rapid. I leaned over the counter and said quietly, "Marcus, you doing okay? You need me to call someone?" He looked at me, and for a second I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. It was not sadness. It was not anger. It was emptiness. Like he had already decided something, and there was no going back. He said, "You should leave." I frowned. "What?" He said it again, slower this time. "You should leave. Right now." Before I could respond, the door opened. A man walked in. He was maybe 40 years old, wearing a green parka and a wool hat pulled low over his ears. He stomped the snow off his boots and looked around the bar. His eyes landed on Marcus. Marcus stood up. The man in the parka smiled. He said, "Marcus Cole, thought I might find you here." Marcus did not say anything. He just stared. The man walked closer. He said, "You have been avoiding me, Marcus. We need to talk." I could feel the tension in the room shift. The pool players had stopped mid-game. Linda had put down her book. Gary was watching from the corner of his eye. Marcus said, "I told you I am done. I am not doing this anymore." The man in the parka shook his head. "You do not just walk away, Marcus. You know that. You made a commitment." Marcus took a step back. "I made a mistake." The man's smile faded. "A mistake? We trusted you. We gave you purpose. And now you want to abandon us? Betray us?" I had no idea what they were talking about, but I knew it was escalating fast. I reached under the counter where we kept a baseball bat. My phone was in my back pocket. I was already thinking about calling 911. Then Marcus pulled a gun. He did not point it at the man. He held it at his side, his hand trembling. He said, "Leave. Now." The man in the parka did not move. He said, "You do not have the guts." Marcus raised the gun. I said, "Leave." That is when everything went wrong. The man lunged forward, grabbing for the gun. They struggled. Someone screamed. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the small space. The man in the parka stumbled backward, clutching his chest. Blood spread across his jacket. He collapsed onto the floor. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Marcus turned toward the rest of the bar. He was still holding the gun. His face was blank, like he was not even seeing us anymore. Gary stood up from his stool. He said, "Son, put the gun down. Just put it down, and we can talk about this." Marcus looked at Gary. He said, "You do not understand. None of you understand." Then he started shooting. The first shot hit Gary in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the bar. The second shot shattered the mirror behind me, sending glass flying everywhere. The third shot hit one of the pool players, a kid in his early 20s named Jason, who dropped to the floor screaming. Everyone was running, diving under tables, scrambling for the door. Linda was on the ground, covering her head with her arms. The couple in the booth were frozen, too terrified to move. I dropped behind the bar counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The dispatcher answered. I whispered, "There is a shooter at the Frozen Pine Bar on Route 47. Multiple people shot. We need help now." She said, "Sir, can you tell me how many people are injured?" I said, "I do not know. I cannot see." He is still shooting. Another gunshot. Then, another. The sound of glass breaking. Someone sobbing. The dispatcher said, "Help is on the way. Stay where you are. Do not try to confront the shooter." I stayed crouched behind the bar, listening. The shooting had stopped. I could hear Marcus breathing, heavy and ragged. I could hear footsteps moving across the floor. Then I heard him say, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Another gunshot. A single, final shot. Then silence. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Finally, I looked over the counter. Marcus was on the floor near the door, the gun next to his hand. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Blood pooled beneath him. I counted the bodies. The man in the parka. Jason, the pool player. Linda, who had taken a bullet to the back while trying to crawl toward the door. And Marcus. Gary was still alive, clutching his shoulder, his face gray with shock. The couple in the booth were unharmed, huddled together, crying. 2 other people were injured but conscious. The police arrived 45 minutes later. By then, I had done what I could to stop the bleeding, pressing bar towels against wounds, trying to keep people calm, trying not to look at the bodies. The aftermath was a nightmare. Investigators swarmed the bar. News cameras showed up. Reporters kept asking me the same questions over and over. What happened? Why did he do it? Was there a warning? The police found Marcus's phone. They found messages, emails, social media posts. They pieced together a story. Marcus had been part of an extremist group. Not political, not religious. Just a loose collection of angry, isolated men who met online and fed each other's rage. They called themselves the Grey Brotherhood. They talked about violence, about revenge, about how the world had wronged them. Marcus had joined them a year earlier. He had been lonely, depressed, looking for connection. They gave him that. They made him feel important, valued, like he mattered. But recently, he had started pulling away. He told them he wanted out. He said he realized they were wrong, that the anger was poison, that he needed help. The man in the parka was another member of the group. His name was Lawrence Webb. He had come to the bar that night to confront Marcus, to bring him back into the fold. The shooting was not planned. It was not premeditated. It was a moment of panic, of desperation, of 2 broken men colliding in the worst possible way. The media called it a random act of violence. They said Marcus was a lone wolf. They said there was no way to predict it. But that is not true. There were signs. There were warning signs everywhere. Marcus had been posting about feeling trapped, about being watched, about not knowing who to trust. His friends said he had been acting strange for weeks, paranoid, withdrawn. But no one did anything. No one reached out. No one intervened. I think about that a lot. I think about the nights Marcus sat at my bar, drinking alone, staring at nothing. I think about the times I could have asked him if he was okay, really okay, and I just poured him another drink instead. I think about Gary, who survived but will never use his right arm the same way again. I think about Linda, who loved reading and wine and quiet nights, and who died on the floor of a bar on Christmas Eve. I think about Jason, who was 23 years old and had just gotten engaged. The Frozen Pine is closed now. The owner boarded it up a month after the shooting. He said he could not stand to be there anymore. No one could. I do not work as a bartender anymore. I cannot. Every time I see someone sitting alone, drinking in silence, I think of Marcus. Every time I hear a loud noise, I drop to the floor. I go to therapy twice a week. I take medication for anxiety and insomnia. I check my locks 5 times before bed. I avoid crowded places. There is a black crow that sits on the fence outside my apartment. It has been there every morning for the past 2 months. It does not move when I walk by. It does not fly away when I yell at it. It just watches me with those black, unblinking eyes. I know it is just a bird. I know that. But it feels like something else. Like a reminder. Like something unfinished. The police said the case is closed. Marcus Cole acted alone. No other members of the Grey Brotherhood have been identified or charged. Lawrence Webb is dead. The shooting is over. But I do not think it is over. I think there are more people like Marcus out there. More lonely, angry, desperate men sitting in bars, scrolling through forums, feeding their rage until it explodes. And I think about the fact that it happened on Christmas Eve. A night meant for peace, for joy, for family. Instead, 3 people died. 7 more were hurt. And a small mountain town in Montana will never feel safe again. I am sharing this because I want people to understand. This was not random. This was not unpredictable. This was the result of isolation, radicalization, and a complete failure to see the warning signs. If you know someone who is struggling, who is pulling away, who is spending too much time in dark corners of the internet, please do something. Say something. Do not wait until it is too late. I waited, and now I live with the memory of 3 bodies on the floor of a bar, blood pooling under Christmas lights, and the sound of gunfire echoing in my ears every time I close my eyes. The crow is still there, watching, waiting, and so am I. I used to work as a contract intelligence analyst for a private security firm in Washington, D.C. This was back in 2014, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in Middle Eastern Studies and way too much student debt. The job sounded exciting, analyzing threat assessments, tracking terror networks, the kind of work that makes you feel like you are doing something important. What I did not know was how quickly exciting turns into paranoid, and paranoid turns into something much worse. My clearance level was not high enough for the really sensitive stuff, but I saw enough. Enough to know that when operations go wrong, people disappear. Not in movies, not dramatically. They just stop showing up to meetings and their desks get cleared and no one talks about it. I learned to keep my head down, do my work, ask no questions. That probably saved my life. In March of that year, I was assigned to a research task. Simple, straightforward. A senior analyst needed background on a failed operation from 1997 involving foreign intelligence services and a hotel in the Middle East. No names, no active case files, just historical context. They gave me access to declassified reports, old news articles, and a folder of sanitized documents with so many redactions they looked like abstract art. The operation was elegant, I have to admit. A target had been tracked for months through phone surveillance and informant reports. High value, dangerous, someone who approved attacks that killed civilians. Intelligence agencies identified his pattern of staying in luxury hotels while moving between cities. They planned to eliminate him in his room using an exotic method, something that would look like natural causes. No bullets, no explosives, no international incident. The entire op was designed to be invisible. What made it fascinating from an academic perspective was how meticulously they documented every step. Surveillance photos, floor plans, equipment specifications, contingency, protocols. Reading through it felt like watching a chess match between grandmasters. Every move calculated, every risk assessed. They even had a man stationed in a room 4 doors down from the target, listening through walls, tracking movements in real time. The operation failed. Not because of bad planning, but because a maid found the target 9 minutes after exposure instead of the expected 4 to 6 hours. He survived. Political crisis. Prisoner exchanges. Methods exposed. The whole thing turned into a case study on how perfect operations fail when humans introduce unpredictability. I spent 2 weeks on this assignment, reading and rereading files, writing a 30-page analysis on operational security failures and diplomatic blowback. Professional, detached, academic. Then I submitted my report and moved on to other projects. That should have been the end of it. 3 days after I submitted the analysis, I started noticing things. Small things at first. My apartment building has 8 units, and I had lived there for 6 months without ever seeing more than 2 or 3 neighbors. Suddenly, there was a man in a gray suit standing in the lobby when I left for work. Different man, same gray suit, standing in the same spot when I came home. He was reading his phone, not looking at anything in particular, but his presence felt wrong, deliberate. I told myself I was being paranoid. Intelligence work does that to you. You start seeing patterns everywhere, connections that do not exist, threats in every shadow. But the next morning, the same man was there again. Same suit, same position, same phone. When I walked past him to the elevator, he did not look up. He did not have to. I could feel his attention on me like weight. That afternoon, I mentioned it casually to a coworker, trying to sound unconcerned. Hey, have you ever felt like someone was watching you after working on a sensitive file? He went very quiet. Then he leaned close and said something I will never forget. There are no sensitive files at our level. We do research. We do not see operational data. If you think someone is watching you, you are either wrong or you saw something you were not supposed to see. I went back through my notes that night. Read every page of the historical operation again. Looked for anything that might have been active, current, or classified above my clearance. There was nothing. It was all decades old, publicly available through FOIA requests. I had not stumbled onto some conspiracy. I had not uncovered active operations. I had done exactly what they asked me to do. But the man in the gray suit was still there. The next week, I started documenting everything. Took photos from my apartment window of the man in the lobby. He was there every morning at 7:30 when I left for work. Every evening at 6:15 when I returned. Never the same man, but always the same presence. They rotated, but the pattern held. Then I noticed the car. Black sedan, always parked 3 spaces down from my building entrance. Different license plates, different make and model, but always a black sedan in the same general position. When I walked to the metro station 6 blocks away, it would pull out and drive past me slowly before turning onto a side street. When I walked home from the grocery store, it would be idling at the intersection I crossed. I am not paranoid. I am trained to identify surveillance patterns. This was textbook mobile monitoring. Multiple vehicles, multiple personnel, rotating shifts to avoid detection. The kind of thing we studied in our threat assessment courses. The kind of thing governments do when they want to know everything about someone without that someone noticing. I started changing my routine. Left for work at different times. Took different routes. Stopped at random coffee shops. The surveillance adapted. If I left early, the man in the gray suit was already in position. If I took a different route, the car appeared at the new intersection. They were not trying to hide anymore. They wanted me to know I was being watched. That is when I made my first real mistake. I tried to lose them. It was a Saturday afternoon in late April, warm and bright. I left my apartment and walked north instead of south, cut through an alley, doubled back through a department store, emerged 3 blocks east, and jumped on a bus heading downtown. Classic counter-surveillance moves. I watched through the window, looking for the black sedan, looking for gray suits. Nothing. For 90 minutes, I felt free. I walked through Georgetown, had lunch at a cafe with outdoor seating, bought a book at a shop near the waterfront. No surveillance, no watchers, no cars following me. I thought I had done it. Thought I had proved to myself that I was imagining things, that the stress of the job was making me see threats that were not there. Then I got home and found my apartment door unlocked. I know I locked it. I checked 3 times before leaving. Always have. OCD maybe, but useful when you work in intelligence. The lock had not been forced. No scratches on the mechanism. No signs of forced entry. Someone had used a key. Nothing inside was missing. My laptop was still on my desk. my wallet still in the drawer, my television still mounted on the wall. But things were moved. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, but moved. The books on my shelf were in slightly different order. The papers on my desk were stacked differently. My bathroom cabinet had been opened and closed. I could tell by the way the bottles were arranged. They'd been inside my home. They had gone through my belongings. They wanted me to know. I called the police. Explained that someone had entered my apartment without permission. The officer who responded was polite, professional. He took notes, checked the door, asked if anything was missing. When I said no, he looked at me with that expression cops get when they think you are wasting their time. He wrote up a report, gave me a case number, and told me to call if I noticed anything else unusual. What I did not tell him was that I noticed something else unusual while he was still in my apartment. Through my window, 4 stories up, I could see the black sedan parked across the street. And standing next to it, talking on his phone, was a man in a gray suit. He looked up at my window while the police officer was there, made eye contact with me, then turned and walked away. The message was clear. They could enter my home whenever they wanted. They could follow me wherever I went. And the police could not help me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the building made me freeze. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, pipes creaking in the walls. I kept imagining someone standing outside my door, waiting for me to fall asleep so they could come back inside. Waiting to do what? I did not know. That uncertainty was almost worse than knowing. I called in sick to work the next day. Then I did something stupid. I went to my supervisor and told him everything. The surveillance, the car, the break-in, the man in the gray suit. I expected him to be concerned, maybe alarmed, possibly supportive. Instead, he got very still, very quiet. Then he asked me a question that made my blood run cold. What exactly did you include in your analysis report? I told him the truth. Everything in the declassified files, nothing beyond my clearance, standard historical analysis. He nodded slowly, then told me to take the rest of the week off. Paid leave, get some rest, maybe see a therapist about work-related stress. When I tried to push back, tried to insist that what I was experiencing was real, he cut me off. Sometimes people in this line of work develop paranoid ideation. It is normal. It is treatable. Take the time off. I left his office knowing I had just made everything worse. The surveillance stopped completely after that. No man in the gray suit. No black sedan. No cars following me to the metro. For 3 days, nothing. I almost convinced myself that my supervisor had been right, that I had imagined the whole thing, that the stress of the job had made me see threats that were not there. Then I received an email. It came from an address I did not recognize. No subject line, no message text. Just an attachment. A photograph. When I opened it, my hands started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my laptop. The photo showed me walking to work, taken from street level, 3 weeks earlier. I was wearing my blue jacket, the one I only wore on Mondays. I was carrying my leather messenger bag. I was mid-step, captured in perfect focus, completely unaware that I was being photographed. And in the background, visible through the window of the building behind me, was a man in a gray suit. Whoever sent it wanted me to know they had been watching me for weeks before I noticed. They wanted me to understand that the surveillance had never stopped. It had only changed methods. They wanted me to feel what I was feeling right now, this deep, primal terror of being hunted by something I could not see and did not understand. I deleted the email immediately, emptied my trash folder, ran every anti-malware scan I had. It did not matter. The damage was done. They had reached into my digital life as easily as they had reached into my apartment. Nothing was safe. Nowhere was private. That is when I saw it. On my bookshelf, hidden behind a row of textbooks I never touched, something was different. A book had been moved. Not one of mine. Someone had placed it there, probably during the break-in I had reported. I pulled it out carefully, expecting what? A listening device? A camera? A threat? It was a copy of a book about the hotel where the 1997 operation had taken place. A detailed history, published in 2012. Someone had bookmarked a specific page, a chapter about surveillance operations conducted in that hotel over the years. And in the margin, handwritten in red ink, were 4 words that made my stomach drop. You were not supposed to know. I do not know what I included in my analysis that I was not supposed to see. I do not know what detail in those declassified files was still active, still operational, still sensitive enough to warrant this level of response. I went through my report line by line trying to find it. The hotel layout? The surveillance equipment specifications? The method of elimination they used on the target? Something I wrote had touched an active operation, and someone decided I needed to understand the cost of that mistake. The surveillance continued, but now it was different. More aggressive. More invasive. I would get text messages from unknown numbers, just strings of numbers that meant nothing to me, but proved they had my phone number. I would receive mail addressed to me, but containing documents I had never ordered, technical manuals about surveillance equipment, brochures for hotels in the Middle East. They were taunting me. They wanted me to break, to quit my job, to disappear. In May, I resigned. Did not give a reason. Did not try to explain. I just turned in my security badge, cleaned out my desk, and walked away. My supervisor barely looked at me. My coworkers said nothing. It was like I had never been there. The surveillance stopped the day I resigned. Completely. Immediately. No more men in gray suits, no more black sedans, no more strange emails or unmarked packages. I moved out of my apartment 2 weeks later, left DC entirely, went back to my parents' house in Pennsylvania while I figured out what to do next. But I think about it constantly. What did I see that I was not supposed to see? What detail in those files was so sensitive that it justified weeks of intimidation? And more terrifyingly, what would have happened if I had not resigned? Would they have escalated? Would I have had an accident? A medical emergency? A sudden disappearance like the people I had read about? I am working as a substitute teacher now. Quiet. Safe. Nothing to do with intelligence or surveillance or operations that fail. I check my locks 3 times before leaving. I cover my laptop camera with tape. I do not talk about my time in DC with anyone. I do not look up articles about operations in hotels or foreign intelligence agencies, or any of the things I used to research. Because sometimes late at night I still see the black sedan parked across the street from wherever I am staying. I still see men in gray suits standing in lobbies and parking lots and coffee shops. I do not know if they are real, or if the paranoia has become permanent. I do not know if I am still being watched, or if I am just broken now, unable to trust that I am ever truly alone. What I do know is this: there are things you are not supposed to see, even in declassified files. There are operations that never really end, just adapt and continue in the shadows. And sometimes the cost of seeing too much is not your clearance or your job. Sometimes the cost is your sense of safety, your peace of mind, your ability to ever feel secure again. I saw something I was not supposed to see, and even though I walked away, even though I left that world behind, I do not think it has left me. I do not think it ever will. The man who was supposed to die in that hotel room survived, but I am not sure I did.